Chapter 1494. Ijichu was still sitting in the car. He looked at Gunyenji quietly from a distance and accompanied her. Amidst the bustling crowd, her lonely figure was particularly eye-catching. A chubby little boy ran over with a big marshmallow and handed it to Gunyenji. He said in a childish voice, "Sister, don't cry. I'll give you some candy." Gunyenji looked up with tears streaming down her face. She saw a little boy of about 4 or 5 years old looking at her with concern and holding a big marshmallow in front of her. Gunyenji didn't really like candy, but looking at the big marshmallow, especially the little boy's big, clear eyes like a deer's, made her cold heart gradually warm up. This world wasn't so cold and heartless, was it? She was touched by the kindness of this strange child. "Thank you." Gunyenji reached out to take it and licked it. The little boy's eyes were curved when he smiled. His chubby little face was like a real red apple that made people want to take a bite. Gunyenji stood up and looked around. "Where are your parents?" The little boy screamed, looked back and shouted, "Papa, Mama?" Not far away, a young couple who were anxiously looking for their child looked over. "Tong Tong." The two of them ran over like crazy and hugged the child. "Tong Tong, are you okay?" The little boy giggled and shook his head. "I'm fine. I gave her some marshmallow and she cried. She was very sad." After eating the marshmallow, she wasn't sad anymore. Gunyenji wiped away her tears in embarrassment and said to the frightened couple, "Thank you, Tong Tong. He's a good child." The young couple saw that Gunyenji was shockingly beautiful and her clothes were neat and tidy. Although the style was ordinary, the quality was very good. They could tell at a glance that she was from a good family. They breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Tong Tong is just naughty. He said he wanted to buy a balloon, but he disappeared in the blink of an eye." The little boy, Tong Tong, remembered the balloon he wanted. He pouted and said unhappily, "I want a big balloon that I can sit in and fly in the sky." "Tong Tong, don't mess around. That kind of balloon is hard to come by. Besides, even if there is one, Mom and Dad can't afford it." Tong Tong's father patiently reasoned with him. The 4 or 5-year-old child did not understand the social class difference brought about by wealth. He only understood half of it, but he also knew that he could not sit in a balloon and fly to the sky. He lowered his head, nodded again and said, "All right, then I'll buy a few balloons to hold in my hands." "Tong Tong is such a good boy." The couple passionately kissed their son and saw Tong Tong giggling again. The family of 3 said goodbye to Gunyenji and went to the balloon stall across the street to buy hydrogen balloons. Gunyenji looked at them enviously and sighed slightly. Ijichu quickly got out of the car when he saw the couple. He was worried about Gunyenji. However, after seeing that there was no conflict, he didn't come over and just stood nearby. After the family of 3 left, Ijichu walked over to Gunyenji and said, "What else do you want to eat? I'll buy it for you." Gunyenji licked the marshmallow and thought to herself, when you're feeling bitter, eating more sweets really does make up for it. She had never liked sweets, but she had a soft spot for this marshmallow. Although the marshmallow was big, it was actually just an empty shell. She only ate a few bites and the huge marshmallow shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. Gunyenji whispered, "I want to ride in a hot air balloon. Can you do it?" Ijichu's shimmering almond-shaped eyes flashed. Of course. He had heard the little boy's wish just now. Ijichu took out his phone and made a few calls. Not long after, a large hot air balloon flew over the square and landed in an open space nearby. Gunyenji smiled and said, "I'll ask Tong Tong to ride in the hot air balloon with me. Is that okay?" Ijichu nodded. "Let's go find him together?" The couple had just bought a hydrogen balloon for Tong Tong and had been playing with it for a while when they saw the hot air balloon flying in the sky. Tong Tong's attention was immediately attracted. This was the balloon he wanted to ride in. So he shouted and rushed towards the hot air balloon with the other children. The staff in charge of maintaining order in the square pulled a rope and separated the hot air balloon from the crowd. Gunyenji walked over and found Tong Tong. She said, "Tong Tong, do you want to ride in a hot air balloon? I can ride with you." "Really? That's great. Thank you, sister." Tong Tong jumped up happily. Tong Tong's parents also rushed over and were extremely grateful to Gunyenji. They said, "Miss, you're too kind." "There's no need." Gunyenji smiled and said, "If you're worried about safety, then forget it. I don't have any other intentions. Tong Tong gave me a marshmallow, so I'm returning the favor." The couple looked at each other, then looked down at their son's eager little face. They almost agreed. But they still had a shred of rationality. Although Gunyenji didn't look like a bad person, she was still a stranger. They were worried about leaving their son with her to ride in the hot air balloon. The hot air balloon wasn't very big, and there were a total of 3 seats inside. One was for the hot air balloon operator and the other 2 were for the passengers. It was impossible to fit their family and Gunyenji in. They were also too embarrassed to ask Gunyenji not to ride in the hot air balloon and only let their family sit in it. This hot air balloon belonged to someone else. They weren't so shameless as to treat someone else's things as their own. However, Tong Tong was so envious that he was on the verge of tears. Seeing this, Hijichu took out his identification and waved it at the couple. He said, "It's okay. I'll go up with them. If you need anything you can look for the He family." When the couple saw that it was someone from the He family, they immediately felt relieved. They smiled happily and said, "Thank you, Tong Tong. You can ride the hot air balloon with Miss and Mr. He." Tong Tong immediately became happy. He held Gunyenji's hand and ran towards the hot air balloon. Hijichu followed and let the hot air balloon operator get off. He went to operate the hot air balloon to take off. Gunyenji and Tong Tong sat in the hot air balloon as passengers. Hijichu was familiar with piloting the hot air balloon, so he quickly ignited it and took off. Gunyenji protected Tong Tong in front of her and looked at the crowd in the square with him. Then she looked at the blue sky and white clouds that were getting closer and closer. Her vision was very wide, and her mood gradually improved. Her smile also became more sincere and refreshing. What she didn't know was that at that moment, someone took out a high-definition long-range SLR camera and took pictures of the 3 of them on the hot air balloon. Hijichu was handsome and elegant, like an orchid tree. Gunyenji was delicate and beautiful, like the dew of a begonia. Tong Tong was lively and cute, just like their child. The 3 of them were chatting and laughing, completely enjoying the joy of a family of 3. When the photo was placed in front of He Qingjian, he was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He wished he could Photoshop Tong Tong's profile picture into his grandson's. That would be a real family of 3. After getting off the hot air balloon, the couple thanked Gunyenji and Hijichu profusely and left with Tong Tong, who had fulfilled his wish. Hijichu saw that Gunyenji's mental state was much better, so he suggested, "Do you want to go to the hospital to see Auntie Qin?" Gunyenji's eyes instantly dimmed. It was as if impurities had suddenly been mixed into the clear crystal, and it carried a kind of coldness and desolation that came before a storm. Hijichu regretted his suggestion and was about to change the topic when Gunyenji said firmly, "Go, I have to get an explanation." When Shui said that Qin Yaoguang was her biological mother, Gunyenji didn't want to believe it, but she wouldn't jump to conclusions so easily. As a very capable lawyer, Gunyenji only believed in logic and evidence. In fact, she had a premonition that Qin Yaoguang was her biological mother the moment she saw her. But after spending time with her, she wasn't so sure. It was very simple. Although there was evidence to prove that Qin Yaoguang was indeed her biological mother because Qin Yaoguang was exactly the same as Gu Xiangwen's wife in the other world, Gunyenji didn't think it made sense logically. Because she couldn't feel any feelings from Qin Yaoguang that a mother should have. Whether it was love or hate, Qin Yaoguang was very indifferent. Qin Yaoguang's attitude towards her was like the 2 of them were strangers who had nothing to do with each other. This was indeed a little abnormal. Since she had questions, she had to choose to face them. Gunyenji never avoided questions. Pretending to be an ostrich wasn't suitable for someone like her who liked to get to the bottom of everything. Hijichu couldn't have asked for more when he saw that Gunyenji was willing to go to the hospital. He knew that Gunyenji had a knot in her heart, and he didn't want Gunyenji to be depressed because of it. "Let's go. I'll take you to the Qin Corporation's private hospital." Hijichu got into the car with Gunyenji. Gunyenji sat in the front passenger seat. Only now did she have the energy to look at the street view of the imperial capital. Along the way, Gunyenji couldn't help sighing. The gap between the rich and the poor was many times greater here than over there. The Qin Corporation's private hospital was the most high-end and luxurious private hospital in the entire Wuxia Empire. It had its own branch offices all over the country. Their headquarters used to be in Z City, but they moved to the imperial capital after Qin Yaoguang got engaged to He Qingjian. As soon as they arrived, they occupied a very good location in the imperial capital. The hospital was built in a grand manner and was full of postmodern colors. One look and it was obvious that they were extremely wealthy. Gunyenji got out of the car and narrowed her eyes at the 2 large words, Qin Corporation, on the exquisite carved iron door in front of her. She said, "The Qin family is that rich?" "Of course." Hijichu also got out of the car and stood behind her. Decades ago, the imperial government decided to build a special zone in Z City. When the special zone was designated, 1/3 of the land belonged to the Qin family. How many times has the land price there increased by now? It's already an astronomical figure. This was the second update of the day, Chapter 1483, Confession Balloon. The update for Meow Little Meow, which had been promoted to the leader of the Alliance last September, had arrived. I'm begging for monthly votes. Good night, dear ones. Chapter 1495. Gu Nianji narrowed her eyes and looked up at the main building of the private hospital. She clicked her tongue. That's impressive. They're considered a wealthy family on your side, right? The main building was too distinctive. The entire shape was like a huge, shiny, long knife that rose from the ground. Hijichu gently placed his hand on her shoulder and led her to the hospital entrance. He said nonchalantly, although they're rich, they don't have a deep foundation. They've only been around for a few decades. They can't compare to other families. Really? Then they also relied on your family to gain a foothold in the imperial capital, right? Gu Nianji gently stepped aside and quietly moved away from Hijichu's hand. Hijichu understood what she meant and didn't insist. He simply put his hands in his trouser pockets and walked leisurely. He said casually, the Qin family's roots are in the south. The Qin family in the Z City Special Economic Zone can shake the Special Economic Zone if they stomp their feet. But in the imperial capital, there's still not enough. Money alone is useless here. The two of them chatted along the way to the hospital entrance. There were security guards standing guard here, and everyone had to register to enter and exit. Gu Nianji looked around curiously and said, why are there so many security guards at the entrance of the hospital? It's so heavily guarded. It's like a prison. Hijichu registered at the guard booth at the entrance and signed his name. Without looking up, he said, to prevent medical disturbances. Gu Nianji, there are medical disturbances here? She was very surprised. In the world she came from, medical disturbances were already a historical term. They had once been aggressive, but later, after strict legislation to protect the legitimate rights and interests of doctors and patients, especially the strengthening of strict law enforcement, those professional medical disturbances had disappeared. Hijichu's hand paused. He put down his pen and turned to look at Gu Nianji. His shimmering almond-shaped eyes flashed. Nianji, this place is different from the one you've been to. It's different. Gu Nianji was almost counting on her fingers. Look, the biggest and best hospitals in your area are private hospitals, such as this famous Qin Corporation private hospital. On our side, the best hospitals are public hospitals. The prices are fair and the doctors are of high quality. It's better than yours. Hijichu scoffed. What do you mean by yours? You're clearly from this side. Don't get it wrong. As the two of them talked, they followed the head nurse who came to greet them. The head nurse was in her 40s and was very enthusiastic about Hijichu. She smiled and said, young Master He, are you here to see Dean Qin? Hijichu nodded. How is Auntie Qin? Are your injuries better? The head nurse nodded, then shook her head. The smile on her face faded. How should I put it? His life isn't in danger, but his hands are crippled. It's a huge blow to both the Qin Corporation and Director Qin. She clasped her hands behind her back and rubbed her fingers uncomfortably. She asked quietly, she can't be the only doctor in your hospital who can perform surgery, right? Is there only one neurosurgeon? But she is the face of our Qin's hospital. If she is disabled, it will be a great loss to our hospital. The matron only realized that it was the woman next to Hijichu who had spoken. She asked curiously, this is? Hijichu put his hand on Gu Nianji's shoulder again and said in an unusually intimate and familiar manner, she's Gu Nianji. Ah. The head nurse was shocked and stuttered, Gu Nianji? Is it really that Nianji? Director Qin's biological daughter? Didn't she go missing? The head nurse almost said the word burned to death, but she changed her words. Because Hijichu hadn't introduced Gu Nianji just now, the head nurse thought that Gu Nianji was just a woman Hijichu brought with him, so she didn't take her seriously. Now that she heard Hijichu say that she was Gu Nianji who had gone missing 7 years ago, she wanted to kneel down and worship her. This girl had a powerful background. She didn't know who had come to the hospital in recent years, but this head nurse had been in the hospital for almost her entire life. She had been an intern at the Qin Corporation's hospital since she first became a nurse. She knew a lot of things. Gu Nianji was not only Qin Yaoguang and Gu Xiangwen's biological daughter, but she was also Hijichu's fiancée and the apple of the He family's eye. She looked Gu Nianji up and down and sighed, I didn't expect you to be so beautiful after growing up. You look so much like Director Qin, especially that cute little mouth. Gu Nianji smiled and began to get information out of her. Oh, you saw me when I was a child? I didn't just see you when you were a child. The head nurse made a gesture with emotion. I also saw you when you were born. She smiled and gestured. When Director Qin gave birth, I was there to help with the delivery. I saw you give birth with my own eyes. You were red like a little monkey. According to the old saying, if a newborn child is red, he or she will definitely grow especially white in the future. See, the old saying is right, right? You are so white as a pile of snow. Gu Nianji's heart sank and she couldn't even keep the smile on her face. Ah, is that so? You saw me born with your own eyes? I was really born to Mrs. Qin? Gu Nianji asked tentatively. Was it in this hospital? Yes. It's on the 16th floor here in the delivery room. The head nurse nodded and led them to a private elevator in the hospital building. The elevator went straight up to the 18th floor. It was the VIP ward where Qin Yaoguang and Wen Shuyi were recuperating. The 18th floor was the highest floor, and there were only 6 ultra-luxurious suites on the entire floor. Soon the elevator stopped on the 18th floor. The elevator door opened, and the head nurse walked out with He Zhichu and Gu Nianji to Qin Yaoguang's ward. Pushing open the unlatched door of the ward, they saw a small living room. There was an exquisite round sofa, a hardwood coffee table, and a mahogany pot rack at the door. On it was an exquisite pot of succulents. The head nurse pointed at the door in the inner room and said, Director Qin is recuperating inside. She walked over and knocked on the door. Director Qin, young Master He and Miss Gu are here to see you. There were sounds of people talking inside, but after the head nurse knocked on the door, the voices stopped. After a while, the door was pulled open from the inside. A tall and handsome man stood behind the door. Young Master He, you're here. It was Qin Jining. Gu Nianji was surprised. Brother Little Ning, why are you here? I'm here to guard Shuyi. Qin Jining didn't give her a good look. He ignored her and pulled the door aside. He Zhichu held Gu Nianji's hand and walked in together. If it weren't for the very high-tech hospital bed, the room wouldn't have looked like a ward at all. The black and white striped window screens were neatly arranged on both ends of the floor-to-ceiling windows. Looking out from the floor-to-ceiling windows, one could see the magnificent and broad skyline of the imperial capital. It was completely unobstructed and echoed the ancient imperial city from afar. Gu Nianji sighed softly. She had only experienced such a beautiful scenery in Speaker Long's Senate building. The location chosen by the Qin Hospital was really a treasured place. Young Master He is here. When Shuyi slowly stood up, her shot hand was bandaged and hung from her neck. Qin Jining carefully supported her other hand. He Zhichu's gaze swept across her arm and he nodded. Has the bullet been removed? It's been removed, Wen Shuyi quickly said. It's just a minor injury. The doctor said it's fine. Gu Nianji couldn't help rolling her eyes. Her wrist had clearly been broken by He Zhichu's shot, but she didn't feel any resentment at all. What a big virgin white lotus. Qin Jining frowned and said, How is it fine? This is a gunshot wound. I'm fine. Look at how anxious you are. When Shuyi looked at Qin Jining and became even gentler. She even used her other uninjured hand to wipe the sweat off Qin Jining's forehead. Qin Jining held her hand and kissed it. The two of them looked at each other lovingly. Gu Nianji gasped. She finally understood how Wen Shuyi had hidden her feelings from He Zhichu. Gu Nianji quickly glanced at He Zhichu. She realized that he wasn't looking in Wen Shuyi and Qin Jining's direction at all. Instead, he was looking at Qin Yaoguang, who was lying on the hospital bed. He said, Auntie Qin, how's your hand? Qin Yaoguang said lightly, It's not life-threatening, but my hand is crippled. He Zhichu didn't say anything. He quietly stared at the scenery outside the floor-to-ceiling window in a daze. Gu Nianji hesitated for a moment, but still walked forward and asked seriously, Mrs. Qin, I heard from Wen Shuyi that you're my biological mother? Is that true? Qin Yaoguang looked at her and said very indifferently, Yes, I'm your biological mother, but I've never treated you as my biological daughter. I'm not interested in filial piety, so don't come here and put on an act. Gu Nianji had mentally prepared herself for a long time and prepared all kinds of responses, but she hadn't expected this to happen. She hadn't expected Qin Yaoguang to really not care about her as her daughter. She didn't even try to hide it. Gu Nianji pursed her lips. She was disappointed, angry, and a little sad. But she didn't show it. She still said calmly, Really? Although you're not interested in filial piety, don't make it sound like I'm very interested. Qin Yaoguang raised an eyebrow. Then what are you doing here? Gu Nianji shrugged. I don't want to be casually acknowledged as my mother, so I have to investigate and prove that my mother is my mother. What nonsense are you talking about? Qin Yaoguang was finally moved. You mean you don't believe that I'm your biological mother? Gu Nianji looked at her, her expression even more indifferent than hers. How can you prove that you're my mother? Of course, empty promises won't work. Qin Yaoguang shook her head. I didn't expect you to be so stubborn. You're really as stubborn as your father. Auntie Qin, don't be angry. Nianji just can't accept it for a while. When Shui walked over with Qin Jining's arm and comforted Qin Yaoguang obediently. Her words aren't pleasant to hear, but she's actually very kind-hearted and doesn't mean any harm. When Shui casually pressed the button on the hospital bed, the head of the hospital bed slowly rose, and Qin Yaoguang went from lying to sitting. Thank you, Shui. Qin Yaoguang nodded at her, then said to Gu Nianji, it's understandable that you're suspicious. I happen to have some evidence here. A paternity test, a maternity certificate, a pregnancy video, and a delivery video. I was going to use it in a guardianship lawsuit with your father, Gu Xiangwen. Later he became a wanted criminal, so I didn't need it anymore. If you want to see it, I'll show it to you. Guardianship lawsuit? Gu Nianji was slightly stunned. What guardianship lawsuit? For you, of course. Qin Yaoguang looked at her with a fake smile. You were in high demand when you were young. Your crazy father tried everything he could to take you away. He couldn't succeed through legal channels, so he could only use underhanded methods. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1484, The Apple of Your Eye. I'll continue to reward and update at 8 p.m. P.S. Thank you to the PPL leader for the 100,000 Qidian coins yesterday. Thank you to Fui001 for the 10,000 Qidian coins yesterday. Moi. Chapter 1496. When Qin Yaoguang talked about Gu Xiangwen, she couldn't hide the contempt and mockery in her tone. Gu Nianji was very disgusted by this and couldn't help interrupting her. No matter what my father did later, he was still your ex-husband and someone you used to love. How can you say that about him? Don't you think you're lowering your own status? How good could she be if she slandered her ex-husband like this? Unexpectedly, Qin Yaoguang laughed so hard that tears almost came out of her eyes. What? You're saying that Gu Xiangwen is my ex-husband? Or someone I used to love? Oh my god. I haven't laughed so hard in a long time. When Shui was also laughing so hard that she almost couldn't straighten her back. Am I wrong? Gu Nianji was confused by their laughter. Hijichu sighed and walked over to put his arm around Gu Nianji's shoulder without saying a word. Qin Yaoguang stopped smiling and said seriously, I've only loved one person in my life, and that's General He Qingjian. I've never married anyone else. Gu Nianji, don't flatter your father. I gave birth to you purely to treat young Master He's illness. Gu Nianji, since you've never treated me as your own daughter and have no feelings for me, why are you still fighting for custody of me? Why don't you give me to my father? Qin Yaoguang said expressionlessly, of course not. I went through so much trouble to give birth to you, and you're of great use. Gu Xiangwen wants to pluck the peaches, so how can I let him get away with it? Her gaze was emotionless as she looked at Gu Nianji calmly, as if she was looking at a commodity waiting to be sold. She didn't treat her like a human at all. Gu Nianji was completely infuriated by Qin Yaoguang's attitude. She no longer cared if this woman was her biological mother or not. In her opinion, no one had the right to look at others like that, not even her biological mother. Children weren't accessories to their parents. A crime committed by a parent against a child was still a crime. The law couldn't be lenient just because it was their biological child who was hurt. Gu Nianji was so angry that she calmed down. She sat down on the armchair in front of Qin Yaoguang's bed and said calmly, really? But unfortunately, I'm already an adult. You don't have to fight the guardian lawsuit anymore. Yes. Qin Yaoguang nodded. There's indeed no need, but no matter how old you are, you're still my daughter. I was pregnant for 10 months and gave birth to you by C-section. Our mother-daughter relationship is protected by the law. It's useless even if you don't admit it. Gu Nianji chuckled. She crossed her arms and leaned back on the sofa. She found a very comfortable position and casually said, is that so? Are you sure you want to talk about mother-daughter relations with me? Do you want me to give you an example? How many ways are there in the law to divorce a mother and daughter? Qin Yaoguang, all right, cut the crap. Show me your so-called evidence. Gu Nianji suppressed Qin Yaoguang and immediately entered lawyer mode. Qin Yaoguang came back to her senses and pursed her lips. She said to Wen Shui, call my secretary and ask her to send over the flash drive in my desk. Not long after the call, a woman in her 30s came with a flash drive. Qin Yaoguang pointed at the computer in the ward. Go take a look for yourself. Gu Nianji took the flash drive, inserted it into the laptop, and began to look through it. The paternity test report, prenatal records, birth certificate, as well as the pregnancy and childbirth videos. Although they weren't long, the beautiful woman with long black hair on them was Qin Yaoguang. The Qin Yaoguang from 20 years ago was even more beautiful than she was now. She was also more similar to Gu Nianji. She skimmed through all the evidence and sent it to her phone. Then she turned off the computer, pulled out the flash drive, and returned it to Qin Yaoguang. Even if the evidence was true, Gu Nianji didn't care. No one could force her to acknowledge her relatives if she didn't want to. When Shui sat down by Qin Yaoguang's bed and said with a smile, "Actually, Auntie Qin still cares about you. Look at how badly you hurt Auntie Qin's hand. She didn't even think of suing you in court. You have to know that Auntie Qin's hands are insured at a sky-high price." Gu Nianji turned to look at Wen Shui. "Sky-high price insurance?" "Yes." Wen Shui adjusted the bandage on her injured hand and said softly, "Auntie Qin is one of the top 3 neurosurgeons in the world. Of course her hand can afford the sky-high price of compensation." Gu Nianji smiled. "That's not bad. At least it's not considered a loss of money." Wen Shui frowned. "Gu Nianji, how can you say that? Auntie Qin has been extremely kind to you. You haven't been here all these years. Auntie Qin hasn't said it, but she still misses you very much." Gu Nianji reached out and made a paused gesture. "Stop. Doesn't your conscience hurt by saying these words?" She then pointed at Qin Yaoguang, who was lying on the hospital bed. "Which part of her shows that she misses me very much? All these years I've been there. She clearly knew, but she didn't care about me. As soon as I came back, she couldn't wait to get rid of my memories. After I took drastic measures, she used a self-directed, self-inflicted injury trick to create the illusion that I cut her hand." Gu Nianji's words were very sharp. "I'm warning you, don't do anything to me. Otherwise, I'll make sure you all suffer the consequences." Qin Yaoguang raised her crippled hands and said unhappily, "I'm a brain surgeon. No matter how self-directed and self-acted I am, I won't joke around with my hands." "That's not necessarily true." Gu Nianji whistled softly and smiled faintly. "Whether or not you will joke around with your hands depends on whether or not you get a lot out of it. Auntie Qin can no longer perform surgeries. What good is there for a doctor?" When Shui shifted on the hospital bed a little further away from Gu Nianji's long legs. Gu Nianji sat on the single-seater sofa, her long, straight legs almost stretched out in front of them. Qin Jining felt that Gu Nianji was arrogant. He walked over and sat next to Wen Shui. He frowned and said, "Nianji, how can you talk to your biological mother like that? You weren't like this when you were young." Gu Nianji thought that Qin Jining had no intention of harming her, so she held back from rebuking him. However, she still gave Qin Jining a warning look and said, "Brother Little Ning, as a man, don't interrupt a woman when she's talking." Qin Jining was dumbfounded. That made so much sense that he was speechless. Gu Nianji looked at Qin Yaoguang. In the blink of an eye, she had found several benefits for Qin Yaoguang to have her hands crippled. She counted with her fingers. There are many benefits. First of all, if your hands are injured, your Qin family's strange memory-stripping surgery won't be able to teach by example. Naturally, it won't be nationalized. Qin Yaoguang shook her head in amusement and denied it softly. "You really measure a gentleman's heart by your own standards. I've long decided to hand this technology over to the state. I've even chosen the trainers. Even if my hands are injured, my mouth isn't injured. I can still teach them." Gu Nianji nodded. "That's for the best, but you've injured your hands, so what you can teach has been greatly reduced. So only the heavens, the earth, you and your Qin family's ancestors know whether or not you're hiding this technology." "Gu Nianji, why do you have to think so badly of people?" Wen Shui had an incredulous expression on her face. She looked at Qin Jining and leaned her head on his shoulder with a wry smile. Gu Nianji looked coldly at Qin Jining's stupid expression of ecstasy. She pursed her lips and continued, "It's not that I want to think so badly of people, but someone is so bad that it's beyond my imagination. So I can only make a normal inference about you within the bounds of the law." She looked at Qin Yaoguang and extended a second finger. "Secondly, you plotted to force me to make a move because you wanted to show the He family that I'm not worthy of you treating me as a daughter. Just think about it, a person who wouldn't hesitate to draw a knife on her own mother. How can anyone believe that she's innocent in such a deformed mother-daughter relationship?" Qin Yaoguang closed her eyes and said calmly, "Whatever you say." Gu Nianji extended a third finger. "Thirdly, if Professor He hadn't rushed back in time, I would have been anesthetized and had a memory-stripping surgery performed on me. My mind would have been blank like an idiot, and I would have become your possession again. She thought of her heaven-defying physique and paused. She looked at Qin Yaoguang with a half-smile and thought to herself, was she also doing this for her physique? Qin Yaoguang opened her eyes and looked at her. She said very calmly, yes, you were born to save young Master He's life. You're his medicine. Your existence is only for him to survive. So don't think too highly of yourself. You're just a medicine. The He family raised you only to treat young Master He's illness. He Jichu turned his head and said calmly, I've recovered from my illness and Yanji is my savior, not a medicine to me. Auntie Qin, don't be so harsh with your words. Qin Yaoguang looked at He Jichu and her tone softened. Achu, you're spoiling her too much. If you spoil her, you're harming her. Look at how presumptuous she is now. She's not polite at all. Gun Yanji suppressed the churning emotions in her heart and said with a smile, many people have donated bone marrow to save lives. No one thinks that they're just a medicine, so they're inferior to others. Mrs. Qin, don't you think your thinking is weird? You really don't sound like a normal person. As a kind-hearted passerby, I suggest you see a psychiatrist. It might have a miraculous effect. Qin Yaoguang sneered. Psychiatrist? Just because I don't have any mother-daughter feelings for you, you're slandering your own mother like this? Why do you say that, Mrs. Qin? Gun Yanji pretended to be very surprised. You have to take medicine when you're sick. It's not good to hide your illness for fear of treatment. You're also a doctor. How can you not even see this clearly? Could it be that it's really difficult for a doctor to treat himself? TSK, actually, it doesn't matter. You're a brain surgeon, not a psychiatrist, right? Gun Yanji was full of mockery. Even someone as strong-willed as Qin Yaoguang was almost unable to withstand it. Her expression gradually turned cold. She looked away and said, that's ridiculous. It's not up to you to say whether I have a psychological problem or not. Of course it's not up to me. I'm not a psychiatrist. Gun Yanji wrinkled her little nose in amusement. Actually, I was just making a suggestion. Your reaction was so big that I could easily think of it as you're trying to hide it here, but the second Wang next door didn't steal it. You're really unforgiving. When Shui spoke up for Qin Yaoguang. You're the one who said all the good and bad things. How can that be? You think too highly of me. Gun Yanji pretended to be modest. Actually, there's a fourth point. Just now, when Shui said that your hand was insured at a sky-high price, so even though your hand is injured, you won't suffer any losses. The ones who will suffer losses are the insurance company. She leaned over with a smile and said mysteriously, can you tell me which insurance company you're from? What are you doing? Qin Yaoguang was wary. Don't do anything rash. Why would I do anything rash? Gun Yanji spread her hands. I just want to make a small fortune. Make a fortune? You bought insurance too? When Shui asked curiously. I didn't buy insurance, but I want to short sell the shares of that insurance company, Gun Yanji said confidently. Mrs. Qin's hand will receive sky-high compensation, so even if that insurance company doesn't go bankrupt, it will still lose a layer of skin, and its profits will drop drastically. If it's a listed company, its stock will definitely plummet at the end of the quarter. If we don't short sell it now, are we going to keep it for the new year? Qin Yaoguang's eyes flashed, but she quickly turned her head away and said expressionlessly, your thinking is really jumpy. It's just a so-so. You flatter me. Gun Yanji cupped her hands and looked at Qin Yaoguang and Wen Shui's subtle expressions. She clapped her hands and smiled. Oh my. I really underestimated you guys. You're already short-selling that stock company's shares, aren't you? TSK, on the one hand, you don't have to hand over the technology because you injured your hand, on the other hand, you asked the insurance company for sky-high compensation, and on the other hand, you're short-selling that insurance company's shares. Miss Qin, are you really a brain surgeon who devotes all his time to medical technology? I think you're more like a speculator who won't get up early if there's no profit, Gun Yanji said tentatively. She had seen what people who really focused on scientific research were like, such as Hua Xiaoheng's mother, Miss Song Jining. Compared to her, Qin Yaoguang's scientific research attitude was not even worthy of carrying her shoes. At this point, Gun Yanji smiled slightly. Her dark jade-like eyes curved like crescent moons. Then in order not to go bankrupt, that insurance company will definitely take you to court. Mrs. Qin, as your daughter, Lawyer Gu, let me give you a reminder. Quickly stop short-selling in the stock market, and at the same time, don't ask for too much compensation. Otherwise, you'll have to wait for the court subpoena, and the insurance company will sue you for insurance fraud. She smiled as she looked at Qin Yaoguang and Wen Shui's suddenly pale faces and drawled slowly, hurry up and beg me. Otherwise, I'll testify for the insurance company and say that you have the subjective motive and objective behavior of insurance fraud. I'm the person who injured your hand. Haha, you want to use her to kill 3 birds with 1 stone and reach the pinnacle of your life? Lawyer Gu will make you lose both your money and your life in minutes. This was today's second update, a 4,000-word chapter with additional updates. Chapter 1485, You Are His Medicine. The 4,000-word chapter was sent to I Am Master Rashi, for the spiritual pet fate rewarded by I Am Master Rashi in September. Good night, dear ones. Chapter 1497. Qin Yaoguang quickly calmed down and glared at Gun Yanji with slight disgust. She turned to look at Wen Shuyi and said calmly, Shuyi, you're a lawyer who graduated from Harvard Law School. Do you think what she said makes sense? Gun Yanji snorted. Does my words have anything to do with which law school she graduated from? Of course. Qin Yaoguang immediately replied, I heard that you only graduated from the law department of a domestic university over there. You don't have a degree from a foreign law school, and Shuyi is a true straight-A student. She was undoubtedly the top graduate of Harvard Law School. 1%. You mean she graduated from a better school than me, so her words are more reasonable than mine? She looked at Wen Shuyi with a half-smile. Teaching assistant Wen, I'd actually like to go to court with you and fight a lawsuit face-to-face. We'd like to see who's better, the B University Law graduates or the Harvard Law graduates. Wen Shuyi's competitive spirit was aroused by Gun Yanji's attitude, and she didn't want to be overwhelmed by Gun Yanji's aura in front of Qin Yaoguang. Because Gun Yanji was Qin Yaoguang's biological daughter, she had a natural advantage. What did she have? In the 7 years that Gun Yanji had been away, she had accompanied Qin Yaoguang like a daughter. What right did Gun Yanji have to be so domineering and provocative as soon as she returned? Did she really think she was a princess? Wen Shuyi's own parents were just gardeners for the He family, so she was more sensitive than anyone else in this regard. Therefore, after thinking for a while, Wen Shuyi said mercilessly, if you really want to go to the insurance company and accuse Andy Qin of insurance fraud, then I can only convince Andy Qin to put justice before family and sue you for intentional injury. She pointed at Qin Yaoguang's hands, which were tied up like dumplings. Look, the hands of a world-famous brain surgeon were destroyed by a fruit knife. At that time we had witnesses and material evidence. The chain of evidence was very complete. The reason why we didn't directly sue you before was because Andy Qin was kind. You are her biological daughter. She wouldn't do such a thing. Gun Yanji wasn't afraid at all. On the contrary, she was strangely excited at the thought of going to court. Sure, go ahead and sue him. Me being a witness for the insurance company doesn't prevent you from suing me. Gun Yanji said with a smile. Her eager expression practically said, sue me, on her forehead. Qin Jining was dumbfounded as he watched from the side. His attention was completely attracted by Gun Yanji. Although she told him not to interrupt, he couldn't sit still when he heard the tension between her and Wen Shuyi. He also knew how powerful Wen Shuyi was. As for Gun Yanji, in his mind, she was still the chubby, slightly squeamish little girl from 7 years ago who had been protected by Hijichu. She was no match for Wen Shuyi. Qin Jining liked Wen Shuyi, but that didn't mean he had to watch Wen Shuyi lead Gun Yanji into a trap. This young lady had called him Brother Xiaoning for 6 years. He couldn't just stand by and watch her die. Qin Jining coughed and tried to smooth things over. Yanji, just apologize. You injured Andy Qin so badly. Even if it was self-defense, it's still a little too much. Besides, she's your biological mother. Without waiting for Gun Yanji to glare at him, he said to Wen Shuyi, Shuyi, you too. You're so much older than her. How can you be so calculative with her? You're not that kind of person. I know you're the most generous and kindest girl. Don't scare her. Wen Shuyi was still smiling when she heard Qin Jining's first words. She didn't expect Qin Jining's next words to hit her before the smile even reached her eyes. She was so angry that she was trembling. What did he mean by so much older than her? She was only 6 years older than her. Besides, she was just talking about the matter. How could she be calculative? However, she had always been very steady and magnanimous in front of Qin Jining. She had never acted like Gun Yanji, who was acting coquettishly at such a young age. After Qin Jining's words, she was even embarrassed to act coquettishly. Gun Yanji saw that Wen Shuyi's face was flushed from Qin Jining's last words. She was about to have a cerebral hemorrhage. She immediately laughed. She nodded her head. Brother Little Ning really amazes the world with a single brilliant feat. What you said today was really good. Yes, I was defending myself, but I didn't hurt Mrs. Qin. The injury on Mrs. Chen's hand was a result of her misjudgment and she grabbed the blade of the knife. But she's my biological mother, so let's just say I was wrong. I apologize to you and I promise I won't hold a fruit knife in the future. Although you asked Wen Shuyi to take out that fruit knife and put it by my hand. Qin Yaoguang looked at her coldly and said aloofly, I don't dare. I told you I don't treat you as my biological daughter, and don't treat me as your biological mother. This responsibility is too heavy for me to bear. Gunyanji shrugged. Fine, then don't say that I didn't apologize. You're the one who doesn't accept it. It's just as well that we won't interfere with each other's business in the future. Don't say that you're my biological mother, and I'll never say that I'm your daughter. Lawyer He and Lawyer Wen are both here. Let's sign a consent form to disassociate ourselves from mother and daughter immediately. Qin Yaoguang scolded coldly, haven't you had enough? What are you doing here today? She quickly glanced at Hijichu. Hijichu put his hands in his trouser pockets and stood quietly beside Gunyanji without saying a word. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. Qin Yaoguang had no choice but to lower her eyes and sigh. She rubbed her forehead and said, I know you're complaining that I shouldn't have brought people to perform the surgery on you, but according to the security regulations, you really have to undergo this surgery. I can't perform this surgery myself now, but after I recover, I'll train a group of people and guide them in performing the surgery. In other words, Gunyanji had to undergo the surgery even if she didn't want to. She didn't even hesitate to use the law to pressure her. This sentence was the last straw that broke the camel's back. In Gunyanji's heart, her biological mother was already a dead person. She would never acknowledge her as her mother. She didn't remember anything about her childhood at all, but even if she did, she wouldn't be able to make the decision for herself. She could probably only toy with this woman. But now that she was an adult, if she was still manipulated by this woman using the word biological mother, then she would have wasted the 7 years she had spent growing up in the Special Operations Forces. To put it bluntly, she had 10,000 ways to make this woman regret giving birth to her. Gunyanji didn't know who her personality was like. In any case, if someone treated her a little better, she would want to repay them with a spring. But if someone treated her badly, whether it was her biological father or mother, then don't blame me for being unjust. She really didn't have the idea that she had to be absolutely obedient and filial to her parents. Her patience was very limited. The words revenge for the smallest grievance could be engraved on her epitaph. Gunyanji's fingers were a little itchy. She rubbed them a few times and looked at Qin Yaoguang with a smile. Aren't you going to give up on performing the surgery on me? Just as she was about to speak again, Hijichu spoke up. Mrs. Qin, Nyenji doesn't need to undergo the surgery. Qin Yaoguang's pupils shrank imperceptibly. Hijichu actually didn't call her Auntie Qin. Instead he called her Mrs. Qin, like Gunyanji. She paused for a moment and quickly said, Achu, you can't break the rules for her. According to the security regulations. Hijichu's shimmering almond-shaped eyes scanned Gunyanji. He said coldly, Mrs. Qin is indeed praiseworthy for not being biased and demanding to be impartial. But the one who needs the surgery is indeed not Nyenji but her. Hijichu looked at Wen Shuyi. Wen Shuyi is the one who needs the surgery the most. Young master Wen Shuyi stood up anxiously. I'm your personal secretary. I meet the requirements of the security regulations. You're no longer one. Hijichu was abnormally cold. I just sent a message to the military to revoke your position as my personal secretary. You've been fired from the military and won't enjoy any privileges under the security regulations. Nyenji is both my fiancée and my personal secretary. She's the one who fully meets the requirements of the security regulations. Hijichu no longer tolerated Wen Shuyi. Today he had personally seen her follow Qin Yaoguang's lead and spare no effort to suppress Gunyanji. Hijichu's disgust for her had completely exploded. Hijichu really couldn't do anything to Qin Yaoguang because not only was she his life savior, but she was also his father's wife. Although he was very unhappy, he wouldn't personally go against her. However, he wasn't so polite to Wen Shuyi. Who did she think she was? Was it fun to use Qin Yaoguang's power to help her suppress her own daughter? Hijichu actually didn't understand what these two women were doing. They clearly knew what position Gunyanji held in his heart, but they still embarrassed her in front of him. Did they think Hijichu was a fool, or were they deliberately slapping him in the face? Or were they testing to see how far he could go for Gunyanji? Qin Yaoguang looked up in surprise, her eyes almost popping out. Jichu, how can you dismiss her just like that? She's my personal secretary, so of course I can dismiss her just like that. Can't I even make the decision for my personal secretary? Ijichu said bluntly. And I'm a major general, and I happen to be in charge of the political department. I can also make the decision for her military status. When Shuyi's face instantly turned pale. It was the color of white plaster. Although it was white, there was an indescribable heaviness to it, like a mask made of plaster. She didn't pay any attention to Hijichu saying that he wanted to dismiss her as his personal secretary. Instead, she was completely focused on Hijichu saying that Gunyenji was his fiancé. She cried out in a low voice, Gunyenji is already engaged to Hua Xiaohan. She's no longer your fiancé. Gunyenji actually didn't want to admit that she was engaged to Hijichu, but seeing how agitated Wen Shuyi was, she couldn't help but want to stab her and let Hijichu see what Wen Shuyi was thinking. She deliberately leaned her head on Hijichu's shoulder and said lazily, that's over there. Don't tell me the law here can still govern over there? Hijichu's shimmering almond-shaped eyes shone with joy. His cold and clear voice was warm and touching. He said, of course not. As he spoke, he hugged Gunyenji's shoulder even tighter. Behind them, someone used a telephoto lens to secretly take a picture of them hugging each other shoulder to shoulder. When Shuyi had to use all the strength in her body to restrain herself from screaming. However, her heart was already desolate. The wish that she had secretly hoped for so many years seemed to have been shattered in an instant. Gunyenji was still deliberately provoking her. When Shuyi, why are you reacting so strongly about me and Professor He? Don't you like Brother Little Ning? Or have you actually been secretly in love with Professor He? Ha! When Shuyi opened her mouth to retort, but when she saw Hijichu looking at Gunyenji's side profile affectionately, she felt bitter and astringent. After much effort she said, what nonsense are you talking about? Of course I like Qin Jining. Qin Jining was also anxious and quickly said, young Master He, what do you mean? Why are you leaving just like that? Hijichu was much more sensitive than Qin Jining. He could also tell that something was wrong with Wen Shuyi, so of course he wouldn't keep her by his side. Gunyenji looked at Qin Jining sympathetically and tugged at the corner of Hijichu's shirt. Hijichu's hand slid down and held her hand. He said to Qin Yaoguang, then please take care of Wen Shuyi's surgery, Miss Qin. Qin Yaoguang smiled bitterly. Achoo. I forget it. I have a headache. You guys go back first. I need to rest. As she spoke, she motioned for Wen Shuyi to lay down the bed and cover her with a blanket. She closed her eyes and looked like she really wanted to rest. Gunyenji secretly despised her and didn't want to stay. She said, Professor He, let's go then. Hijichu suppressed the excitement in his heart and nodded slightly. Then Mrs. Qin, please rest. We'll go back first. When he and Gunyenji reached the door, he turned to Qin Yaoguang and said, Mrs. Qin, take good care of yourself. In a few days I'll be holding a grand banquet for Gunyenji to welcome her back. This is today's first chapter. Chapter 1486, Reading Her Mind. I will continue to reward and update at 8 p.m. moi. Chapter 1498. After Hijichu left with Gunyenji, Wen Shuyi said to Qin Jining, you can go back first. Auntie Qin is too tired and so am I. Qin Jining quickly said, I can stay and take care of you. We have professional care, Wen Shuyi said with a smile and gently pushed Qin Jining. Besides, you're very tired. If you're exhausted, my heart will ache. Qin Jining beamed when he heard this. He left Qin Yaoguang's ward in satisfaction. After Qin Jining left, Wen Shuyi stayed by Qin Yaoguang's bed alone, wanting to say something but hesitating. Of course, Qin Yaoguang didn't rest. She just didn't want to get into a conflict with Hijichu because of Gunyenji. After everyone in the ward had left, Qin Yaoguang opened her eyes and said calmly, hurry up and inform my second uncle to stop shorting the shares of that insurance company. Wen Shuyi was stunned. You still believe Gunyenji's words? Gunyenji had said that if they shorted the shares of that insurance company, the other party would face astronomical compensation and an avalanche of stock prices. They would definitely take the risk and sue Qin Yaoguang for insurance fraud. Qin Yaoguang hadn't actually formally proposed compensation to the insurance company yet. She was still shorting the shares. Unexpectedly, Gunyenji's words had indeed alerted Qin Yaoguang. She wasn't that short of money. Shorting the shares was a habit for her, so she didn't think too much about it. Now that she thought of the drawbacks, she wisely decided to stop. Wen Shuyi felt a chill in her chest as she looked at Qin Yaoguang's duplicitous expression. With Gunyenji around, she was really transparent in the eyes of these people. After 7 years of hard work, she thought that she had climbed out of her own class and entered the top class of the empire with her own achievements. However, when Gunyenji returned, Not only did Hijichu immediately turn against her, but even Qin Yaoguang, who had never treated Gu Nianji as her own daughter, was quietly changing her attitude. When Shuyi really didn't want to take it anymore. How was she worse than Gu Nianji? Wasn't it just that Gu Nianji would reincarnate? She had become Qin Yaoguang and Gu Xiangwen's daughter, while she was only the gardener's daughter. No matter how hard she worked, even if her academic results were better than Gu Nianji's and her work results were better than hers, she still couldn't compare to her. She smiled and tucked Qin Yaoguang in and said gently, "Okay, I'll go tell second Uncle Qin." After leaving the Qin Corporation's private hospital, Hijichu and Gu Nianji didn't go home immediately. Instead, they went to a restaurant for lunch. The car arrived at the restaurant's parking lot, but Gu Nianji was in no hurry to get out. She sat in the front passenger seat and whispered to Hijichu, "Professor He, I only said those things in Mrs. Qin's room today to anger Wen Shui. I didn't mean anything else." Hijichu was a bit disappointed. He rested his hand on the steering wheel and said dryly, "I understand. Gu Nianji." She was silent for a while, then said, "My unmarried relationship with you doesn't really exist in the eyes of the law, does it?" Gu Nianji had left Hijichu when she was 12. Even if their parents had a verbal agreement in the past, it was only a verbal agreement. For a legal engagement, both parties had to be at least of age, which was 18 years old. Hijichu smiled bitterly and reached out to touch Gu Nianji's head. "Why did you study law? And she was so good at it." Gu Nianji tilted her head and smiled. "I'm not stupid and sweet. Did I disappoint Professor He?" "Not at all." Hijichu retracted his hand and smiled. "You're fair and sweet, but you're not stupid. If you remove all my memories, I'll really be stupid and sweet." Gu Nianji put one hand on the car window and seemed to be deep in thought. "I thought Mrs. Qin was really just enforcing the law, but when it came to Wen Shui, she immediately changed the topic." Before Gu Nianji was sent to the He family, Hijichu didn't know that Qin Yaoguang and Gu Nianji's relationship was like this. At that time, he remembered that Gu Xiangwen had taken the initiative to send Gu Nianji to the He family. Hijichu knew that this little girl was born to save his life, and she had indeed succeeded. He was very grateful to her and agreed to his parents' request. He promised to marry this little girl when she grew up and take care of her for the rest of her life. Qin Yaoguang was also present at the time. She was so excited that she even wiped her tears. The first day he saw the 6-year-old Gu Nianji, Hijichu was still a little surprised. She was holding her doll. She was thin and small, very vigilant and silent. She liked to hide under the table and secretly observe him. Compared to other 6-year-old children, she was too quiet and too obedient. Hijichu's original feelings for her were more about responsibility and gratitude than anything else. But after seeing Gu Nianji like this, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pity. He let Gu Nianji stay in the suite next to him. He woke her up every morning and had breakfast with him. He hired a special tutor to teach her primary school lessons. Hijichu came back from school that night and the two of them had dinner together. Gu Nianji, who had just arrived at his house, didn't argue, cry, or make a fuss. She was so obedient that it made his heart ache. Hijichu asked his father to send 4 female soldiers to take care of her. When he wasn't at home, Gu Nianji couldn't be without people by her side for even a second. It was either the female soldiers or the tutor. There were at least 3 people by her side. Under his careful care, Gu Nianji slowly became lively and mellow. She would sit at the door waiting for him to come home and tell him what she had done that day. She would tell him what she wanted. She no longer looked at him with admiration, but learned to take the initiative to fight for it. Hijichu loved her like a younger sister, and his mother also doted on her like a daughter. After Hijichu went to college and lived on campus, Gu Nianji was personally taken care of by his mother. However, a year before he graduated, his mother suddenly passed away. Gu Xiangwen was the last person to see his mother, so she became a suspect in his mother's death and was wanted all over the world. Hijichu didn't live on campus anymore. He joined the army and took over his position while taking care of Gu Nianji. He also had to comfort his father, who couldn't handle the shock of his mother's sudden death and fell ill in bed. The past was still vivid in his mind. The little girl who had been by his side more and more cheerful was now sitting next to him and calmly drawing a line between them. Hijichu closed his eyes sadly and smiled bitterly. "Can't you coax me a little more? Even if it's fake, can't you let me be happy for a few more days?" Gu Nianji also felt bad. She turned her head and said softly, "Professor He, I'm married. I can't let Huoxiao down." "But you got married over there. We don't recognize it here." Hijichu murmured. "Also, are you really going to wait for him to come to you? Even if there's a technological breakthrough over there and he's willing to come over, how long will you have to wait? 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Hijichu's voice grew colder. Also, you know that Hua Xiaoheng won't abandon his responsibilities and come over. Gun Yanji actually thought so too. But even if Hua Xiaoheng didn't come over, she wasn't ready to accept Hijichu. In her heart, Hijichu was like a brother and a friend. She didn't have any romantic feelings for him. Professor He, my mind is in a mess right now. I haven't thought about these things yet. Can you give me some time to think about it? Gun Yanji said carefully. She didn't want to beat Hijichu to death again. Hijichu nodded. I'll give you as much time as you want. Then can you not mention our unmarried relationship at your banquet? Gun Yanji didn't want everyone to know about this. It wouldn't be good if it became a fait accompli. Hijichu understood what she meant. Although he was reluctant, he still nodded and agreed. Therefore, the He family's banquet this time would only say that they welcomed Gun Yanji's return and nothing else. It could also be considered as restoring her identity. The two of them got out of the car and walked into the restaurant to have a good meal. Hijichu became very talkative. He kept introducing the signature dishes to Gun Yanji. He also talked about the local customs and the similarities and differences between the two places in great detail. Gun Yanji also listened very seriously. The two of them ate for nearly 3 hours. When they returned home, Hijichu said to Gun Yanji, I want to talk to father about the banquet. Shall we go together? Gun Yanji hesitated for a moment but agreed. Hijichu brought Gun Yanji to He Qingjian's study to see him. The door to He Qingjian's study opened. When Shuyi was standing inside and smiling at them, Gun Yanji was slightly taken aback. When Shuyi? You recovered so quickly and were discharged from the hospital? When Shuyi raised her bandaged arm to her and said, How did a gunshot wound heal so quickly? I was discharged from the hospital, but Auntie Qin had something to say to General He and asked me to pass on the message. What is it? Hijichu glanced at her. Is it about removing you from your military post and canceling your position as a personal secretary? Of course not. When Shuyi smiled and hid her emotions so well that even Gun Yanji couldn't tell. She was still muttering to herself, how did she get over it so quickly? The three of them walked in. He Qingjian smiled and said, That's great. Achu, you're holding a banquet for Yanji, aren't you? Gun Yanji looked at Hijichu. Did you text General He about this? They hadn't even said anything, so how did He Qingjian know? Hijichu shook his head. He Qingjian saw this and smiled. It was Yaoguang who called me just now. She said that you told her about the banquet at the hospital and asked Shuyi to come back specially to talk to me about the details of the banquet. Gun Yanji. Hijichu was unhappy. I'll get someone to prepare the banquet. Miss Wen, you don't have to worry about it. When Shuyi smiled but didn't say anything, He Qingjian said excitedly, Yaoguang suggested that we take advantage of the banquet to officially get the two of you engaged. Then we'll immediately prepare for the wedding. When spring comes next year we'll get married. How about it? That's what I think too. This is today's second update, chapter 1487, saying one thing but meaning another. It was only the beginning of the month. Don't you have the guaranteed monthly tickets for your relatives anymore? Monthly tickets. The immortal fate, 50,000 Chidian dollars, that the leader of Lavender Mimi had rewarded last October has arrived. Moi. Chapter 1499. As soon as He Qingjian finished speaking, Hijichu quickly asked, When Shuyi no longer has any security privileges, how did she enter this study? With both hands in his trouser pockets, he stood elegantly beside Wen Shuyi. His shimmering almond-shaped eyes were cold and indifferent as he stared at Wen Shuyi without a trace of emotion. Wen Shuyi froze, then blushed. She pretended to be calm and said, General, he let me in. He Qingjian waved his hand and said nonchalantly, Yaoguang asked her to come and talk to me about something else. It's easier to talk in the study. It's fine. I let her in. Since He Qingjian had agreed, Hijichu no longer hesitated and said calmly, I was the one who suggested this banquet to welcome Yanji back. As for the engagement and marriage, they had to be solemn ceremonies. There was no need to rush to bring them up at the welcoming banquet. This is too disrespectful to Yanji. A reception was a reception, and an engagement was an engagement. Although it wasn't a big deal to have two functions in one banquet, for people of their social class, it wasn't prudent enough. It was obvious that the man didn't value the woman enough, so he conveniently announced his engagement at the reception banquet. He Qingjian thought about it and felt that what Hijichu said made sense. However, what he was most concerned about wasn't whether this matter was important or not. but that he could only be at ease if Gunyenji married Hijichu immediately. He narrowed his eyes at Gunyenji, wondering if her heart had already returned to Hijichu. When Shui smiled and nodded at Gunyenji. Did you see that? The He family did treat you wholeheartedly. Although Auntie Chin has always said that she doesn't treat you as her biological daughter, she doesn't mean it. She has always had you in her heart. She has never neglected your happiness. It's your good fortune to be able to marry young Master He and marry into the He family. All the single girls in Huaxia are scrambling for this opportunity. Of course, it will only be left for their biological daughters. Her words not only complimented He Qingjian, but also helped Qin Yaoguang smooth things over. Even He Jichu had to admit that Qin Yaoguang's suggestion was a little motherly. Otherwise, He Jichu would have a terrible impression of her based on her behavior in the ward at the Qin hospital. In He Qingjian's heart, of course, his son was the best. There were only people his son didn't want, and there was no girl who didn't want his son. Even if he did, he would only be temporarily blind. After a long time he would know how good his son was. He had spent so much effort to get Gunyenji back so that she could be with He Jichu. Qin Yaoguang's suggestion was indeed very favorable to He Qingjian. He Qingjian was elated when he heard that. Shui, you're exaggerating. Actually, I'm old. As long as you juniors can be happy together, I'll die without regrets. When Shui quickly smiled and said, General He, don't say that. You're still young. You still have to watch young Master He and Miss Gu have children. You have grandchildren. Grandchildren? He Qingjian's eyes lit up, and his gaze swept between He Jichu and Gunyenji. Gunyenji watched as when Shui drew a bigger and bigger picture for He Qingjian. Her eyes darkened and she had no choice but to say, Miss Wen, what do you mean by that? In the ward today Mrs. Qin and I already made it clear. She doesn't treat me as her biological daughter, and I don't treat her as my biological mother. We almost signed a mother-daughter relationship. May I ask where she and you got the nerve to turn around and interfere with my personal marriage? You're still blaming Auntie Qin? When Shui pretended to be enlightened. But in the ward today Auntie Qin was too impatient. You were also like little chili pepper. You were at odds with each other. Didn't you start quarreling? She then clicked her tongue. Actually, after seeing you talk in the ward today, no one doesn't believe that you're not mother and daughter. You're both equally stubborn. He Qingjian understood that Gunyenji had gone to see Qin Yaoguang today and seemed to have caused a scene. He quickly said, Nianji, your mother is indeed a straightforward person. She says what's on her mind. Although her words may not be pleasant, she doesn't hold a grudge against others. She forgets after saying it. She's all about medicine and doesn't know much about the ways of the world. Gunyenji blinked and thought to herself, so Mrs. Qin Yaoguang was using the persona of a straightforward scientist who didn't understand the ways of the world, in front of General He. This persona was indeed quite interesting. If she offended you, it was because she didn't understand the ways of the world, and if she said the wrong thing, it was because she was straightforward. She was in an invincible position. But it didn't matter. She, Gunyenji, also knew how to set up a persona. She was now the persona of a little cabbage who yearned for maternal love but couldn't be abandoned by her biological mother. Let's see who can act better. Gunyenji's eyes reddened and tears immediately fell. Yes, she's a straightforward person. She can say in front of me that she doesn't treat me as her biological daughter. But all these years what I've yearned for the most is a mother who dotes on me, loves me and puts me first. She's straightforward, but she's also the director of a big hospital. She has so many people in her hands, so how could she not know how to speak? She just thinks that to me she doesn't need to put in so much effort to speak properly. Hijichu thought about what he had seen in the ward today and felt extremely sorry for Gunyenji. He put his arm around her shoulder and patted her gently. He Qingjian saw that Gunyenji was crying and felt pity for her. He quickly handed her a tissue and said, Nianji, don't cry. If you feel wrong, tell Uncle He. If your mother goes overboard, Uncle He will have a good talk with her. Gunyenji took the tissue and wiped her tears. She said aggrievedly, she doesn't understand the ways of the world, but I'm also an orphan girl who has no parents and lives under someone else's roof. Who taught me the ways of the world. How old is she? How old am I? I've never done my duty as a mother, and now I want to dictate my marriage. I really can't accept this. The corners of Wen Shui's mouth twitched as she watched from the side. When did this Gunyenji crave motherly love? She was following Hua Xiaoheng over there. She was so smug and arrogant. How did she look like a little orphan girl who has no parents and lives under someone else's roof at all? This was too much of a blatant lie. The corners of Wen Shui's mouth twitched. She smiled apologetically and said, Nianji, you're too sensitive. A child doesn't speak of his mother's mistakes. Even if Auntie Qin doesn't pay attention to her words, it's because she treats you as her own daughter. Do you have to choose your words carefully when speaking to your own daughter? Don't you think that's too distant? Gu Nianji stopped crying and said seriously, I don't think so. Even if we're as close as father and son and mother and daughter, basic courtesy is still needed. Besides, she's already said that she doesn't treat me as her own daughter, so your premise isn't valid. Since your premise isn't valid, then your conclusion isn't valid either, so don't bite the bullet and clear her name. When Shuyi's face turned red from her rebuke, she said embarrassedly, Haha, this isn't a court. Do you still need to make logical deductions? Miss Wen, you're also a lawyer. I thought it was a lawyer's occupational disease to speak logically. Gu Nianji's tears quickly welled up again. Besides, do you really think her proposal is to treat me as her own daughter? You're too naive. When Shuyi had always been known for being steady and magnanimous, no one had ever called her naive. She couldn't take it anymore. She subconsciously asked, why doesn't she treat you as her own daughter? She chose such a good marriage for you, and you're still not satisfied. How many people can't get it even if they beg for it? Gu Nianji turned her head away and said with a sulky expression, if she really treats me as her own daughter, she should be concerned about what kind of person I like and whether I'm willing to marry. She shouldn't be so eager to suck up to him and sell me off like a commodity. He Qingjin frowned and said unhappily, Yao Guang knows what's good for you. She knows that Jichu loves you the most, so what's wrong with suggesting that you get engaged and married immediately? Of course there's something wrong. Gu Nianji even refuted He Qingjian's words. Who is the most important person to you, Uncle He? Of course it's Jichu, He Qingjian said without hesitation. That's right. Then what were you thinking about when you were considering a marriage partner for Professor He? Of course I was thinking about who the girl he loves the most is. My greatest wish is for him to marry the girl he loves the most. Gu Nianji sighed and said enviously, Professor He is really lucky to have a father like you. To He Jichu, being a father was the best he could be. But for Miss Qin, has she considered my feelings? Does she know who I love the most? No. To her, the most important thing is to please you, Uncle He, and make your son happy. Not to consider the wishes of my biological daughter. If someone didn't know better heard this, they would think she was Professor He's biological mother. Did she ask me who I like? Did she ask me who I want to marry? She didn't ask anything. Now she's even saying she's her biological mother. How disgusting. Gu Nianji glanced at He Jichu as she spoke. He Jichu noticed Gu Nianji's gaze and understood what she meant. He felt indescribably uncomfortable. However, he had promised Gu Nianji, so he couldn't go back on his word. Gu Nianji still had feelings for Hua Xiaoheng, so she still refused to accept him. If he didn't say something to express his stance, this little lady would probably fall out with him on the spot. However, before He Jichu could speak, He Qingjian's expression had already changed. He asked sternly, You've said so much. Are you still unwilling to be with Jichu? Gu Nianji didn't beat around the bush and simply told him the truth. You also know that I'm already engaged to someone else. The matter between me and your son was actually just a verbal agreement between the two families when we were young. It has no legal effect. If you insist on going your own way against my wishes, then try it. I'll show you what it means to force a melon not to be sweet. This was the first update of the day, chapter 1488, A Melon Not to Be Sweet. Today was Monday and recommendation votes were especially important. Continue to reward and update at 8 p.m. moi. Chapter 1500. What kind of person was He Qingjian? Perhaps no one had ever spoken to him like this in his life. Even He Jichu, who sometimes went against him, had never been so rude. He Qingjian's expression instantly changed when he heard Gu Nianji's harsh words. When Shuyi immediately panicked. General He, don't be angry. It's fine, it's fine. Nianji, you're really something. Can't you speak nicely? As she spoke, she helped He Qingjian sit down and frantically called the He family's family doctor. When they heard that He Qingjian was sick, the family doctors rushed outside the study within a minute. He Qingjian clenched his fists and felt his ears buzz. All the blood seemed to rush to his brain, and his vision was a little blurry with a dark red color. He allowed Wen Shuyi to help him sit down. He covered his heart with his hand and slowly calmed his breathing. He Jichu was also shocked. He turned around and opened the study door to call in a family doctor. This person was the head of the family doctors. He came in with a medicine box on his back and walked straight to He Qingjian. Seeing his expression, he immediately said, "This is angina. Hurry up and take some medicine." They all had medicine for angina pectoris. Hijichu poured a glass of water and personally took the medicine from the doctor's hand. He gave it to He Qingjian. He Qingjian took the medicine and closed his eyes to rest against the chair for a while before he recovered. The buzzing in his ears disappeared, and his vision became clear. His face, which was flushed with blood, gradually returned to normal. However, his chest was still a little stuffy. Gunyanji felt a little regretful when she saw how angry He Qingjian was. Wasn't she going too far? Hijichu looked at He Qingjian intently and poured him another glass of warm water. "Drink some more?" He Qingjian drank the water with his hand. He glanced at the family doctor in the room and said, "Jichu, help me send the doctor off and get me a few more bottles of medicine. I don't have much medicine left." Hijichu nodded and followed the doctor out. After Hijichu left, He Qingjian sat for a while before glancing at Gunyanji. Gunyanji moved closer to his desk and said embarrassedly, "General He, I'm sorry. If anything really happened to He Qingjian because of her words, she would be in deep trouble." He Qingjian looked at her with a dark gaze. After a while he said, "Nianji, you're not young anymore. You're already 19, right? You're turning 20 in October? In less than a month's time." Gunyanji nodded, and her mood immediately sank. Her 20th birthday was coming up, but Hua Xiaoheng could no longer celebrate it for her. She really didn't want to celebrate her birthday anymore. He Qingjian looked at her absent-minded look and thought of his son's calmness. His hands secretly clenched into fists. Was 7 years really that irresistible? What was so bad about her son? When Shui didn't seem to notice the undercurrent between them, she chuckled and said, "Nianji, don't be too willful. With such good conditions, why are you still struggling? As for your engagement with Hua Xiao, that's something from another world. Just treat it as a dream. Since it's a dream, there's no need to take it seriously." He Qingjian observed Gunyanji carefully and saw that the corners of her eyes and brows were filled with disapproval. It was probably because of what she had said just now that he was so angry that he almost had a seizure, so he didn't continue arguing with Wen Shui. It seemed that getting her to be with Hijichu wasn't something that could be accomplished overnight. Gunyanji looked up and said calmly, "No, that's not a dream. You and I both know that it's a real spacetime. So what if it exists? You can't even go over now," Wen Shui said lightly. "And their science and technology are too far behind ours. They won't be able to come over in a short time. I estimate that in 50 or 100 years, their technology might advance by leaps and bounds." Gunyanji raised an eyebrow. "That's none of your business." He Qingjian also said, "In the past few years, Shui and I have been using magnetic field transmissions a lot. The magnetic field energy has already been consumed a lot. This time, in order to bring you back, something went wrong midway. The magnetic field device went out of control. Not only did it consume most of our energy, but it also almost lost you and Jining. I left the last batch of energy for Jichu to support his return." He Qingjian sighed. "Otherwise, perhaps Nianji and the others wouldn't have landed on Snake Island in the Caribbean that time. The remaining energy isn't enough to form a magnetic resonance." He shook his head disapprovingly. When Shui continued to persuade Gunyanji, "Look, it's not that we're deliberately not letting you go back, but even if we want to send you back now, there's nothing we can do. Without enough magnetic field energy, we can't activate the magnetic resonance, so of course we can't transmit." Gunyanji's heart ached terribly, but she forced herself not to cry in front of them. She could cry when she was acting, but when it came to expressing her true emotions, she didn't want to cry. When she was really sad, she would hide and cry alone. Those were the tears that truly belonged to her. The tears shed in front of others didn't count. Everyone knew that they were all 1,000-year-old foxes, and they were acting like strange tales from a Chinese studio. So stop fooling around. When the banquet is held, tell him about your engagement with young Master He. When Shui brought this up again, you have to take a step back in order to advance, but you have to know your limits. How can you take your marriage as a joke? Gunyanji was extremely annoyed. Her face darkened at Wen Shui and she said coldly, "I've always been a man of my word. I've never taken a step back in order to advance. Don't judge others by your own standards. Use your own thoughts to figure others out. Yes, you're the most noble." When Shui picked up her Hermes platinum bag from the sofa and hung it on her arm, she didn't stand on ceremony anymore. "I've already talked until my mouth is dry, but you still refuse to let go. What I want to remind you is that without the He family, you're nothing. Why are you putting on an act?" "I'm putting on an act." Gun Yanji was so angry that she laughed. I've been talking for so long. Do you think I'm deliberately trying to sell myself? I didn't say that. Wen Shuyi had a good temper. As she walked towards the door, she said, actually, you just get things too easily. You don't cherish things that you get too easily. Unlike people like us, our families are too poor. My parents are only gardeners, so I have to work harder than you to sit in the same position as you. Gun Yanji finally understood Wen Shuyi's intentions. Wasn't she just mocking her and saying that she was relying on the He family to raise her status? She put her hands in her trouser pockets and took 2 steps forward. She said to Wen Shuyi's back, I never meant to look down on your background. You can't choose your background just like I can't choose my parents, but you can choose what path you take. Wen Shuyi paused in her steps and turned to look at her. She said with a half smile, you're already standing at the top, even though you're relying on the He family. So it's easy for you to say that. Unlike her, although she had already entered the He family's door, she could be kicked out at any time. Gun Yanji scoffed and said calmly, you're quite concerned about the He family. Don't tell me that I'm nothing if I leave the He family? To be honest, you're really nothing if you leave the He family. Wen Shuyi didn't stand on ceremony anymore. There was a faint excitement in her eyes, like a hunter who had finally seen her prey walk towards the trap she had set. He Qingjian's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at Gun Yanji. He thought to himself that Wen Shuyi's words made sense. If Gun Yanji were to go out and experience the life of a real ordinary person, she would have to work hard every day. Her greatest wish in life was to get a loan to buy a small house and spend the rest of her life in a small house. She should be able to understand how good Hijichu was if she suffered a little. Gun Yanji played right into his hands and said, okay, I'll leave the He family and live on my own. Do you think I'm nothing if I leave the He family? Sure. Wen Shuyi immediately applauded. I'll wait and see. Gun Yanji turned to He Qingjian and said, General He, do you agree? If you agree, I can leave the He family immediately and rely on my own abilities to make a living. He Qingjian looked at her meaningfully and said, do you really want to leave the He family and rely on your own abilities to make a living? Of course, what's not to believe? Gun Yanji was very confident in her own abilities. Moreover, being able to leave the He family and not have to see Wen Shuyi and Qin Yaoguang again was more beneficial than harmful to her. Wen Shuyi continued to tease her. Okay, since you said you'll rely on yourself, you have to leave the family with nothing. You can't take anything from the He family with you, nor can you use any of the He family's resources. You can't even tell others that you know anyone from the He family. Pursing her lips, Wen Shuyi added, you can't tell others that your mother is Auntie Qin Din Qin. Only then would Gun Yanji be on the same starting line as her. She wanted to see how Gun Yanji, who had nothing and didn't even have a diploma, could do so well here. Gun Yanji didn't fall for her trap. She crossed her arms and snorted. Are you stupid? I'm not cheating on you. Why would I leave the family with nothing? Is there a connection? I'm just saying that you can't take a single needle from the He family, Wen Shuyi said with a smile. General He, do you make sense? He Qingjian looked at Gun Yanji and couldn't bear it. Although he wanted Gun Yanji to experience the life of an ordinary person in society, he didn't want her to live too hard. She just needed to experience the suffering of the people and suffer a little. If she suffered too much, not only would Hijichu be unhappy, but even he, as her uncle, couldn't stand it anymore. However, he wanted to see how Gun Yanji would react, so he didn't reply. He smiled but didn't say anything. Gun Yanji saw that He Qingjian didn't say anything and looked at her calmly like an old fox. She scoffed and said, of course I won't take a single needle from the He family, but I still want what belongs to me. There's something here that belongs to you? Wen Shuyi stretched out her arms and casually walked around the room. Why didn't I know? How do you know? Gun Yanji retorted bluntly. Are you the He family's nanny or housekeeper? Do you know what the He family has? Of course, Wen Shuyi wasn't a nanny or a housekeeper. She was a Law JD graduate with first-class honors from Harvard Law School. She was also the director of the military's legal department. No, she had been the director of the legal department. Wen Shuyi straightened her back when she thought about how Hijichu had removed her military record. She didn't want anyone to see her dissatisfaction and anger. She said lightly, this is based on common sense. You've been away from here for 7 years, and the things here have long changed. Gun Yanji chuckled and said, I understand what you mean. Don't worry, I won't take a single cent from the He family. What I want is indeed what belongs to me. As she spoke, Gun Yanji looked at He Qingjian. General He, I'm new here. You have to get me a legal identity document including an ID card, a passport and an official education certificate. Yi Qingjian laughed. You want me to open the back door for you? What happened to not relying on the He family? Gu Nianji didn't blush at all. She said plausibly, how is this opening the back door? I'm alive and well in the other world. I have my own identity, my own job, my own degree certificate and my law license. You were the one who forcefully brought me here against my will. So, based on the principle of reciprocity, shouldn't you provide me with the same identity document and education certificate? What she meant was that she had to be responsible for ending the sins she had committed. Yi Qingjian thought about it for a moment and agreed. Okay, I'll get you an identity document and education certificate, but you'll have to retake the law license yourself. It's a deal. Gu Nianji and Yi Qingjian high-fived to make an oath and smiled meaningfully. When Shuyi hadn't expected Gu Nianji to easily obtain a master's degree and education certificate from the university's faculty of law. Of course, there was also proof of education from primary school to university. With her ID card and education certificate, her identity in this world would be confirmed. To Gu Nianji, she only needed these things to find a job to support herself. She also had her own plans, but these plans required her to get rid of the He family first, especially when Shuyi, who was always paying special attention to her. When Shuyi was silent for a moment before suggesting, although Nianji wants to experience life, the security in those ordinary neighborhoods isn't very good. She's so beautiful. What if she encounters a gangster? Yi Qingjian said, I've already considered this. I plan to send someone to protect her closely. Who are you going to look for? When Shuyi asked with great interest. I know a few people who are good at martial arts. They're all young Master He's subordinates in the military. Gu Nianji could tell that they wouldn't let go completely and let her leave the He family alone. However, this wasn't a bad thing. After all, Gu Nianji still didn't know anything about this world. She didn't know how the security was like, so she still needed time to adapt. She only felt grateful that Yi Qingjian had promised to send someone to protect her closely. Gu Nianji looked at Wen Shuyi, who had been giving her ideas, and said calmly, I have a candidate. I hope General He will agree. Who do you want to protect you closely? Yi Qingjian asked in surprise. Gu Nianji raised her chin. Colonel Qin Jining. He's a very good person. If I need someone to protect me closely, I'll only trust him. Yi Qingjian was also very confident in this person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have specially appointed him to go there to pick Nianji up. He nodded immediately. Okay, I'll let Jining follow you. You'll call each other cousins. Half of Wen Shuyi's face darkened. Why do you want Qin Jining to accompany you? You did it on purpose, didn't you? This was the second update of today's 4,000-word reward, Chapter 1489, You Did It on Purpose, Didn't You? Today was Monday and recommendation votes were especially important. P.S. The big chapter is I Am Master Rashi, a spiritual pet fate reward last October. Good night, sweethearts. Chapter 1501. Gu Nianji thought to herself, I did it on purpose, but why would I tell you? In the face of Wen Shuyi's sudden aggressiveness, she immediately chose to panic. She took 2 steps back to Yi Qingjian's side and deliberately expressed her question cutely. Uncle He, why can't I choose brother little Ning? Didn't you agree? Miss Wen is so scary like this. Even Uncle He's words don't work? I thought she was the one in charge of the He family. She was already pretty and sharp-tongued. When she acted cute, even Hua Xiaoheng couldn't handle it, let alone Yi Qingjian. He almost regretted asking her to move out. He quickly patted her back and coaxed her. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Uncle He will make the decision for you. As he spoke, his gaze turned to Wen Shuyi and he smiled. Shuyi, do you have a problem with me asking Jining to protect Nianji? Wen Shuyi's heart skipped a beat when she saw Yi Qingjian's unfriendly expression. She quickly said, General He, that's not what I meant. I mean, what do you mean? Gu Nianji pretended to be a fox exploiting the tiger's might, and became arrogant. Don't you mean that I can't do something you don't agree to? Even if Uncle He agrees to it? Of course not. Wen Shuyi quickly explained. What I mean is, there are so many talents in the military. Why do you want Qin Jining? He's not the best. What if he can't take on the heavy responsibility? Haha. Gu Nianji took 2 steps forward and interrupted her. It's just to protect me. Is it that difficult? Does Miss Wen think that in a country like Huaxia, under the full protection of General He, I will still be in great danger? Wen Shuyi's expression froze, but she quickly calmed down. She gently twisted the silk scarf wrapped around the belt of her Hermes platinum bag with one hand and said with a smile, Of course not, but your safety is of utmost importance. Gunyanji interrupted her again and shook her head. I'm just an ordinary person. Brother Little Ning can definitely deal with ordinary thieves. If there's a villain that even Brother Little Ning can't deal with, then someone is deliberately targeting me. She took another step forward, forcing Wen Shuyi to take a step back. Miss Wen is so clear about this. It seems that my safety actually falls on Miss Wen. Gunyanji raised her eyebrows and said meaningfully, "What does it have to do with me?" Wen Shuyi quickly glanced at He Qingjian. He Qingjian still maintained his smile. It was so natural that she couldn't tell what he was thinking at all. Gunyanji folded her hands behind her back and moved closer to Wen Shuyi. She whispered in her ear, "Of course it matters. If I'm really being pursued by an unknown person, it can only be Miss Wen's instigation." She turned around and pointed at Wen Shuyi with one hand. She looked at He Qingjian and smiled softly. "Uncle He, remember this. If anything happens to me in the future, the real culprit will definitely be this Miss Wen. Whatever alibi she has, you can't believe it. She'll definitely confess everything under the 3 woods." Gunyanji. Wen Shuyi was scared out of her wits. Her face turned pale. "You're a lawyer too. How can you slander me so carelessly? If you say that again, I can sue you for slander." "How did I slander you?" Gunyanji turned her head calmly. "Do you want me to explain the legal meaning of slander to you? And you say you didn't slander me? You're implying that if anything happens to you, I'll be the murderer." Wen Shuyi was so angry that her chest puffed up. "I said if something happens to me. Don't you understand the word? If?" Gunyanji's voice was clear and melodious, like pearls falling onto a jade plate. "If means that it might not happen. If it happens, then it's an objective fact. I didn't slander you. If it doesn't happen, then you're not the murderer. May I ask how I slandered you? Why are you in such a hurry to put the murderer label on yourself?" Gunyanji's expression darkened. "Or did you actually have the intention to set a trap to chase me out of the He family so that you could find someone outside to do it? Actually, why did you have to go so far? You could have done it in the He family and there would have been no consequences at all. If you had done it in the He family, you could have escaped unscathed. Nothing would have happened. Why did you have to go so far as to chase me out?" Wen Shuyi caught the indignation in Gunyanji's words towards the He family and immediately said, "It's fine if you're talking about me, but why drag the He family into this? If the He family isn't safe, where else in the entire Wuxia Empire is safe?" He Qingjian coughed. "Nianji, you really don't have to worry about your safety in the He family." "Oh? Is that so?" Gunyanji didn't turn around. She said aloofly, "Uncle He, have you forgotten that just this morning at the He family's house, I was almost forced to commit suicide by them? Are you saying that I don't have to worry about my safety in the He family?" He Qingjian was rendered speechless by her. But how could he have imagined that Yao Guang would go against his own daughter? Now that the mother and daughter were like fire and water, He Qingjian also felt a headache coming on. He shut his mouth in embarrassment. Wen Shuyi was indignant. "Even if something happened to you, why am I the murderer? You still say you're not slandering me?" Gunyanji crossed her arms over her chest and said calmly, "I'll tell you why if something happens to me you're the murderer. Because if something happens to me, you'll be the one who benefits the most. The general inference in murder cases is that most murderers want to obtain some kind of benefit from the deceased. Whoever reaped the most benefits would be the most suspicious. Do you still need me to teach you that?" Wen Shuyi's face turned red and white. She clenched and unclenched her fists. After a while she said agitatedly, "Nonsense. If something happens to you, what benefit can I get? Don't slander me." "Yes, what benefit can you get? Let me think." Gunyanji walked around her. "How did you get to Professor He's side? You don't need me to remind you, do you? 7 years ago, because Professor He mistakenly thought that I had died in a car accident, you came to Professor He's side as a replacement. So as my replacement, don't you hate me the most? Because I didn't die, everything you once had slipped away from your hands. What people are most afraid of is not having what they have, but losing what they have." The more Gunyanji spoke, the more excited she became. Although she actually didn't have any evidence, her words were almost like nonsense. Wen Shuyi's palms gradually became sweaty, but she still asked Gunyanji very calmly, "Are you serious?" Gunyanji tilted her head. "Yes, I'm serious. Unless you can swear that if I'm no longer in this world, you won't be with Professor He, I'll believe that you're not the possible murderer." Wen Shuyi flew into a rage. "Why would I make such an oath? You've gone too far. Haha, are you saying that you've actually been coveting Professor He? Then why are you holding on to brother little Ning? Gu Nianji glanced at He Qingjian and gave him a you-know look. He Qingjian's eyes darkened, but the corners of his lips curled up at her teasing. When he smiled, the deep wrinkles at the corners of his eyes curled up. His pair of peach blossom eyes looked even more charming than He Jichu's. Gu Nianji looked away and thought to herself, no wonder her cheap mother had waited for this man for more than 20 years. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to resist such a fine specimen. Only Major General Hua could compare to him. Gu Nianji thought of Hua Xiaoheng and her eyes softened. The smile on her face was as sweet as honey. He Jichu happened to push open the door and come in. He saw Gu Nianji's sweet smile and big watery eyes. His heart skipped a beat and he almost couldn't breathe. He held the door handle and stood for a while before asking, "What were you talking about just now?" When Shuyi's face was flushed red. She was completely too embarrassed to stay any longer. She hurriedly said, "I'm going back. Auntie Qin is still waiting for my reply. General He, I'm leaving first." She turned around in a panic, opened the study door and quickly ran out. Gu Nianji didn't want to stay here any longer. She bowed slightly to He Qingjian. "Uncle He, please inform brother little Ning that I'm going to pack my luggage now and move out of the He family immediately." "What's going on?" He Jichu immediately grabbed Gu Nianji's arm and asked nervously, "Why are you moving out of the He family?" Gu Nianji gently pushed his hand away and said with a smile, "Professor He, ask Uncle He. I'll be leaving first. You father and son have a good chat." Although she wasn't very strong, her actions were very firm. She pushed He Jichu's fingers away one by one and resolutely left. The door to the study slammed shut again. There were only He Jichu and He Qingjian in the room. He Jichu glared at He Qingjian angrily. His almond-shaped eyes were almost on fire. "You'd better explain it to me. What's going on?" He Qingjian felt a little sorry for his son. In order not to bear He Jichu's anger, he covered his chest with his hand and cried out again. "My chest hurts. Do you have any more medicine?" He Jichu hurriedly walked over and took out the medicine. He then picked up the landline phone. "Why are you not feeling well again? I'd better call the doctor quickly." He Qingjian had no choice but to press down on his hand and smile obsequiously. "Achu, it's okay. Dad is fine. I was just joking with you. You were so angry. Dad was scared." He Jichu couldn't vent his anger when he saw his father, who was extremely dignified in front of others, lowering his head and begging for mercy in front of him. He closed his eyes and rubbed the space between his eyebrows with his hand. He sat down on the sofa. "Dad, what's going on? Tell me quickly. I'm not angry." He Qingjian looked at He Jichu with heartache. He thought to himself, Gu Nianji, that little girl, was full of arrogance. If he didn't destroy her prestige, how could she be willing to spend the rest of her life with He Jichu? His decision was not wrong. After hesitating for a while, He Qingjian still picked out the important parts of the situation and said, "Nianji was the one who suggested it. I think it's quite good. Let her go out for a walk, hit a few walls and learn a few lessons. Then she'll know why flowers are so red. Only Jichu is good in this world." He Jichu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He only felt his head hurt even more. It seemed that no matter who met Gu Nianji, they would become abnormal. "Dad, you really don't understand Nianji." He Jichu sighed. "Let her go out. What you have to worry about is not that she'll hit a wall, but that the wall will hit her. If she gets angry, she can tear down the wall for you. You still want her to learn a lesson outside? That's impossible." He Qingjian, "Aren't you exaggerating? Is she really that powerful?" He Qingjian rubbed his chin with his hand. "Who does this little girl look like? When your Auntie Qin was young, she wasn't as smart and cunning as she was. Could it be that she really looks like that lunatic?" This is the first update of the day, chapter 1490, He's the Best in the World. A reminder for everyone, monthly votes and recommendation votes. Monthly votes for 1,500 plus updates at 8 p.m. moi. Chapter 1502. How could she be like Gu Xiangwen? Yijichu didn't think much of it. Nianji is very friendly, lively and talkative. As long as she wants to, she can get along well with anyone. And Gu Xiangwen has interpersonal disorder. Have you ever seen him talk to anyone nicely? Except for Nianji. Besides, Auntie Qin is like a stranger to Nianji other than giving birth to her. Nianji isn't like any of them. Yijichu curled his lips. If she wants to be like someone, she's more like me. After all, she grew up with me from 6 to 12 years old. She's also very talented in the law. He Qingjian, how could such a fatherly smile appear on Yijichu's face? Yi Qingjian felt very upset. Yi Zhichu didn't want to talk about these two people anymore. He quickly changed the topic. Then what about the welcoming banquet? You promised her to leave the He family, but you still have to hide your identity. Does that mean you don't have to hold the banquet? We can wait for now. She doesn't want to get engaged and married right away. Yi Qingjian didn't want He Zhichu to be sad. After she comes back willingly. He Zhichu reached out and made a pause gesture. Stop. So you listened to Auntie Qin's opinion and rejected my suggestion. He Qingjian. He Zhichu stood up calmly. Looks like my mother has been dead for so many years. It's time for a new generation to replace the old. Zhichu. He Qingjian panicked. He stood up and growled, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by a new generation to replace the old? I've only had Su Wen in my heart. Really? He Zhichu's expression was calm to the point of indifference. But that doesn't stop you from listening to others. Moreover, between your son and your wife, you chose your wife's opinion. Isn't that obvious? My mother is in your heart and only in your heart. Your mind is now occupied by Qin Yaoguang. He Zhichu pointed at his head. But I don't blame you. We're all adults and we don't care about who we'll be for the rest of our lives. If you were the one who died first, I would also persuade my mother to remarry. He Qingjian's lips trembled violently. His face gradually turned pale and his rosy lips turned purple. He Zhichu looked at him and pursed his lips. Don't be agitated. I didn't mean to criticize you. But I have never meddled in your affairs with other people, and you must not meddle in my affairs. But Yaoguang saved your life after all? He Qingjian said in a trembling voice, you were terminally ill. The best doctors in the world said you wouldn't live to adulthood. It was Yaoguang who proposed the gene therapy. For you, she experimented many times and finally gave birth to Nianji. I know you don't like her and I never wanted you to call her mom, but we can't be heartless. Su Wen gave birth to you, but Yaoguang also gave you a second life. Yi Zhichu rubbed his temples in pain. I'll remember your kindness to me. But if you think that because she saved my life belongs to her and I have to listen to her, then please take this life back. I don't want to live anymore, okay? His eyes gradually reddened, but he gritted his teeth and tried his best to restrain himself. The beginning? That's not what I meant. He Qingjian's voice became serious. Yaoguang never wanted you to do anything for her. She saved you for me and Su Wen, and also to challenge the pinnacle of medicine. He paused and continued, Yaoguang has a straightforward temper and speaks bluntly, but she doesn't have any bad intentions. People who devote themselves to scientific research are all like that. Yes, she's good to everyone, but she abandoned her own daughter. He Zhichu smiled bitterly. Actually, what right do I have to criticize her? Isn't everything she did for me? He Zhichu had very complicated feelings about Qin Yaoguang. He should be grateful to her. After all, without her he would have died at the age of 16 like He Zhichu over there. However, Qin Yaoguang had been so good to him, but now it was obvious that she didn't treat Gu Nianji as her own daughter. To her, Gu Nianji was just a medicine to treat He Zhichu. This way of expressing her feelings confused He Zhichu. He had thought that no matter what, Qin Yaoguang was Nianji's biological mother. What mother wouldn't love her daughter? Perhaps he was wrong. In this world, there really were mothers who didn't love their biological daughters. He remembered that when Nianji was still young, she had been rather distant from this mother. Qin Yaoguang didn't come to see her often, but she didn't mind. The happiest time for her was when Gu Xiangguan came to see her. However, Gu Xiangguan was also very busy, even busier than Qin Yaoguang. Once he went into the laboratory to do experiments, he could not come out for half a year. Gu Nianji would be happy for a long time if he came by occasionally. She would place the gifts he brought on the floor of the room and carefully paste a small note on each gift with the date of the next year before putting it back in the box. Then she would open the box every day and take out a gift in chronological order. This way it would be as if Gu Xiangguan came to see her every day. Although He Zhichu disliked Gu Xiangguan very much, he had to admit that he was a good father. Of course, this was compared to Qin Yaoguang. Compared to He Qingjian, Gu Xiangguan was at least as far away from a good father as two parallel universes. Gu Xiangguan was a genius, a well-deserved genius. Geniuses usually had weird habits and bad tempers. He really could not get along with anyone. He was very impatient with the laboratory staff under him. Whenever he was unhappy he would scold them, "Your brain is as small as an atom. You can't even see it with a high-powered microscope," or, "Are you a paramecium? There's only one single cell in his entire body?" The assault was very serious. If it weren't for the fact that he was too talented and could publish many world-class theses with him, those people wouldn't have endured the humiliation and become his students. However, Gu Xiangwen was surprisingly patient when he was with little Gu Nianji. Yijichu remembered that Gu Nianji had just turned 6 that year. Gu Xiangwen had given her a copy of Quantum Physics for Serious, Quantum Mechanics for Serious. Yijichu disagreed at the time and said, "Uncle Gu, isn't this book too profound for a 6-year-old child?" Unexpectedly, Gu Xiangwen said, "This is a children's book on quantum mechanics that I specially wrote for her." Yijichu knelt on the spot. He had personally written a book for his daughter, and it was a children's book on quantum mechanics. The book was still in Yijichu's room. It was the only thing that Gu Xiangwen had left behind that hadn't been smashed and burned by the furious He Qingjian. Yijichu wasn't very surprised by the conflict between Qin Yaoguang and Gu Nianji, but he was still very sad. He felt sad for Gu Nianji, so he wanted to give her more love, but she didn't need it. Yijichu put his hands in his pockets and clenched his fists tightly. His fingernails dug deep into his palms. After his wife passed away, the most important person in He Qingjian's heart was his son, Yijichu. Now that Yijichu was dissatisfied with Qin Yaoguang, He Qingjian chose to give up on Qin Yaoguang without hesitation. He couldn't make his son unhappy. This was the treasure that Su Wen had left him. If he didn't take good care of her, he wouldn't have the face to see her in the afterlife. Since Nianji is leaving the He family, I don't plan on staying either. Yijichu put his hands in his pockets. His figure was tall and straight like a bamboo pole. Take care. Yijichu. Forgive me this once. I really didn't mean to reject you. He Qingjian felt a wave of panic in his heart. Had he really done something wrong? Wasn't the person Yijichu loved the most in his heart Gu Nianji? He only wanted to help him be with the person he liked. What was wrong with him? Perhaps he was wrong. The last thing he should have done was listen to Qin Yaoguang's suggestion today. He rejected Yijichu's suggestion and even agreed to Gu Nianji move out of the He family. He Qingjian staggered out from behind the desk and said anxiously, "I'll go find Nianji and ask her to stay. Let's have a welcoming banquet. It's happening right away. I'll ask the housekeeper and orderlies to prepare the list." Yijichu held his arm with a pained expression. "Dad, don't be like this. Yijichu, I really just want you to be fine." He Qingjian's tears streamed down his face. "I've let your mother down. I've let you down. He suddenly raised his other hand and slapped himself hard in the face. Yijichu was stunned for a moment. He quickly pressed down on He Qingjian's other arm and said sternly, "Dad. Yijichu, it's Dad's fault. Dad will divorce Qin Yaoguang immediately." He Qingjian couldn't care less now. "Don't go. And Nianji, I'll go talk to her myself, apologize to her and ask her to stay, okay?" Faced with such a father who was so devoted to him, Yijichu couldn't continue insisting on moving out. He knew that his father's illness was already very serious, and this illness wasn't a genetic illness. Even if Gu Nianji was there, she wouldn't be able to cure him. It was an injury he had suffered in his early years in the military that caused his organs to fail. To put it bluntly, he was old. Coupled with the fact that his heart wasn't very good, if the stimulation was too much, he could die at any time. Yijichu's heart was burning, but he finally endured it and said, "Dad, take good care of yourself. I won't move out. But don't worry about Nianji and me." "Really?" He Qingjian grabbed his arm tightly. "Don't you need me to apologize? It's all Wen Shuyi's fault today." She kept pushing her around. She was pushed around until she had no choice but to say she wanted to move out, and even asked Qin Jining to be her security guard. Yijichu knew Gu Nianji very well. If she didn't want to leave, even 10 Wen Shuyis wouldn't be able to make her leave. She had agreed to leave, so there was a high chance that she wanted to leave. Why did she want to leave? Because she didn't want to live with him and was worried that they would be too involved. Yijichu didn't say this out loud. He held He Qingjian's arm and walked him back to the bedroom. He said, "Since I'm back, you can rest in peace and recuperate. The security in the study needs to be increased. No one can be let in if they don't meet the security level. Even if you agree." Okay. Whatever you say." He Qingjian got into bed after washing up. He obeyed Yijichu's words. "And Auntie Qin. She's not a military personnel, so the security level she enjoys is too high." Yijichu was still brooding over Qin Yaoguang's insistence on performing the surgery on Gu Nianji. "Wen Shuyi too. I'd like to see when these two will perform the surgery on themselves." Okay. Whatever you want." He Qingjian was about to become Mr. 3. Other than okay, and okay. Hijichu took care of He Qingjian to sleep before turning off the lights and leaving. He had been gone for 4 years. His father had really aged a lot. Hijichu had originally planned to stay on the other side and not come back, but now that he was back, he had a way to come back. He wasn't in a hurry at all. With Gun Yanji, he had a lifetime to accompany her as she slowly grew old. Walking out of He Qingjian's bedroom, he saw He Qingjian's orderly standing at the door with an anxious look on his face. "What's wrong?" "Young Master Miss Gu has packed her suitcase and is about to leave." This is today's second monthly ticket, 1,500 plus updates, delivered, Chapter 1491, A New Generation Replaces the Old. A reminder for everyone's monthly and recommendation tickets. P.S. Thank you for the 60,000 book coins that Tian Tianxin from Buckle Bookstore gave. I finally have the first leader from Buckle Bookstore. Moi. Chapter 1503. Hijichu looked at his watch. It was almost midnight. Was she that impatient? Where is Miss Gu now? She's already downstairs. She's in the living room downstairs. The orderly stepped aside. Hijichu quickly walked past him, bringing with him a gust of wind. As he came down the spiral stairs, he saw Gun Yanji's back as she dragged her suitcase. Her long hair was tied in a ponytail behind her back. She was wearing a very ordinary white t-shirt, jeans and white sneakers. She looked as fresh as a student who had just entered university. She was only in her second or third year. A few orderlies blocked the door from letting her out. Gun Yanji was trying to reason with them. "General, he personally agreed to let me leave. You can call and ask. Why do you have to send someone up? What a waste of time. You've been there for so long but there's no reply. Are you doing this on purpose? You're restricting my freedom, I'm telling you." Her crisp voice was mixed with a hint of annoyance. It was nice to hear, but it also gave people a headache. Hijichu couldn't help laughing. The phone in He Qingjian's study wasn't something that just anyone could call. The orderly downstairs turned pale from Gun Yanji's scolding. He almost couldn't take it anymore. When he saw Hijichu coming over, he quickly said, "Young Master He is here. Miss Gu, please speak to Young Master He." They put away their guns and returned to their posts to continue standing guard. Gun Yanji turned around and smiled as if she had seen her savior. "Professor He, you're finally here. You heard it with your own ears in the study just now." Hijichu bent down and helped her pick up her suitcase. He said, "Let's go back and stay for the night. We'll leave tomorrow." "But..." Gun Yanji blinked and saw that Hijichu had already carried her suitcase up the stairs. She quickly followed him and said anxiously, "Professor He, you'll still have to leave sooner or later. Why do you have to do this? It's just one night." Hijichu closed his eyes and stopped at the top of the stairs. He turned around and said, "Stay one more night. I'll get you your lawyer's license." Gun Yanji's eyes lit up. "Are you serious?" Previously, He Qingjian had only promised to give her an ID card, a passport and proof of her education since she was young. He had specifically said that he would not give her a lawyer's license and that she would have to take the exam again. Although Gun Yanji wasn't afraid of exams, the problem was that she had just checked. The law exam here was held once every 2 years in July. She had just taken the exam in July this year, so if she wanted to take the exam herself, she would have to wait another 2 years. After she returned to her room to check the time, she realized that she had been tricked by He Qingjian. If she had to wait 2 years before she could get her lawyer's license, then she wouldn't be able to appear in court as a lawyer for the next 2 years. At most, she would be an intern in a law firm. But how could she make a name for herself in such a short time? At that time, he was so angry that in a fit of anger, he packed his simple luggage and planned to leave the He family that very night. She thought about how not only had she been bullied by her own mother, but she had also been bullied by He Qingjian. Why? She hadn't expected Hijichu to immediately understand why she wanted to leave in the middle of the night and immediately grant her wish. Gun Yanji beamed. "Professor He, I knew you were the best." Hijichu looked at her with a half-hearted smile. "I'm no longer a professor. Young Master He is the best." Gun Yanji smiled so widely that her eyes curved. Although Hijichu wasn't satisfied with this title, it was much better than the distant Professor He. He carried his luggage upstairs and said, "You can stay for the night first. I'll get someone to get you all kinds of documents. You can leave as soon as tomorrow afternoon, okay?" Gun Yanji had been most worried that Hijichu would stop her. Now that he had let her go, her uneasy heart was immediately relieved. She followed Hijichu back to her room on the 3rd floor with a smile on her face. Hijichu put her suitcase back. It's late. Have a good rest. Young Master He, you're not angry with me, are you? Gu Nianji moved closer to him and observed his expression. So what if I'm angry? Will you stay? He Jichu looked at her calmly and stroked her high ponytail. Gu Nianji shook her head with a smile and said sincerely, Young Master He, I'm planning to leave your He family. I'm not deliberately retreating in order to advance, nor am I acting on a whim. I really want to live on my own. After a pause, Gu Nianji's voice lowered. It was no longer noisy and crisp. Instead, it was a little more coarse. Actually, Wen Shui is right. I've always lived under your protection. There's Major General Hua over there and you here. I'm grateful to you, but your status is too high. To me, standing too high always makes me feel unrealistic and illusory. Young Master He, let me have my feet on the ground for once and experience the life of an ordinary person. My heart is in a mess. I want to leave you guys and calm down. I'm not afraid to tell you that ever since I found out that Mrs. Qin was my biological mother, I wish that I was a real orphan. With a mother like this, it's really better not to have one. Gu Nianji honestly expressed her feelings. I can't even be an orphan now. She smiled bitterly. I really don't want to see her, so let me go. If I stay here, I'll make things difficult for you and Uncle He. Why? There were some things that she might not even be able to say to Hua Xiaoheng, such as how she felt about her biological mother, but to He Jichu she said it very naturally. He Jichu looked at her emotionally. Nianji, I'm very happy that you told me this. He opened his arms and hugged Gu Nianji. Don't feel burdened. I definitely won't like someone you don't like. Even if she saved my life. Gu Nianji was extremely surprised. Mrs. Qin really knows medicine? He Jichu was amused by her expression and scratched her delicate nose. Mrs. Qin is indeed a genius in medicine. He thought about it for a moment and told Gu Nianji, Your father, Gu Xiangwen, is an absolute genius. Even he is full of praise for Mrs. Qin's medical attainments. Your father developed a good impression of Mrs. Qin because of the academic exchange. He Jichu implicitly mentioned the relationship between Gu Xiangwen and Qin Yaoguang to Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji remembered that Qin Yaoguang had personally said that she had never been married and had never loved anyone else. She only loved He Chengjian, and her heart felt even more stifled. She pursed her lips and said disdainfully, Then my father really doesn't have good taste. He Jichu patted her shoulder. Alright, your father does have average taste in women, but as a scientific genius, it's already a miracle that he has such a relationship. This kind of person should have been married to his lab for the rest of his life. He didn't want to talk about Gu Xiangwen anymore, so he changed the topic. Sleep early. I'm leaving tomorrow. What gift do you want? Gu Nianji recalled that He Qingjian had once said that her father was involved in a murder case, and that He Jichu's attitude was a little strange when he mentioned Gu Xiangwen. She tugged at the corner of He Jichu's shirt. Young Master He, why do you always hesitate to say something to my father? Do you dislike him so much? Is it because he's involved in a murder case? Young Master He, you don't have to avoid it. Tell me about it. Gu Nianji looked at He Jichu pitifully. He Jichu was speechless. He knew he couldn't hide it for long, but he couldn't bear to tell Gu Nianji the truth. He didn't know what to say. Gu Nianji's heart skipped a beat when she saw He Jichu hesitate. She was worried that her father, Gu Xiangwen, was the same as Qin Yaoguang. Neither of them treated her as their own daughter, so she didn't want to hear it anymore. She stammered, I'm sleepy, young Master He. See you tomorrow. Without waiting for He Jichu to speak, she had already pushed him out of the room. The door closed in front of He Jichu's eyes, and He Jichu heaved a sigh of relief. Gu Nianji was really understanding, He Jichu thought. Knowing that it was difficult for him to speak, he didn't ask any more. Gu Nianji slept very soundly that night. When she woke up in the morning, it was almost noon. She stretched and sat up from the bed. Looking at the low-key and luxurious bedroom, she smiled and let out a long sigh. She got up to wash up and change her clothes. She tidied up her suitcase and was about to stand up when she heard someone knock on the door. Gu Nianji turned on the video call and saw He Jichu standing outside the door with a translucent file bag in his hand. She quickly opened the door and said with a smile, Young Master, he is so efficient. Is this my ID? He Jichu handed over the translucent file bag and said, Your ID, passport, education certificate, degree certificate, graduation certificate, and lawyer's ID are all inside. It's exactly the same as your situation over there. It's not fake, is it? Gu Nianji deliberately expressed her worry. Of course not. The ID is all real. Of course the experience is fake. He Jichu knew her little trick. It's the same as your ID over there. Gu Nianji opened the file bag and took out the things inside to check them one by one. As expected, even the ID number was exactly the same as the one over there. She kissed her ID and smiled. Young master, he is indeed amazing. The key is that even Major General Huo might not be able to do it so quickly. It would take at least a month to complete the entire set of things over there. However, He Jichu had done it in just one morning. He Jichu smiled. Our side is different from the other side. The technology is more advanced, and all the systems are connected to the internet. It's very easy to add or change them. Gu Nianji rolled her eyes and drawled sweetly, "Really? That's great. I like such a technologically advanced network system." He Jichu saw that she had taken out her ID and didn't look inside the file bag anymore. He coughed. "There's something else inside." Gu Nianji replied with an "oh," and reached out to take out a black card and an ordinary Wuxia bank card. He Jichu's ears turned red, but he still said very calmly, "You have to use money to live alone when you go out. The black card has no limit. There's 100,000 yuan in the Wuxia bank card. You can use it first." Gu Nianji was speechless. If she had so much money in her hands, what was the point of her going out? Besides, this black card was like a locator. As long as she used it, no matter where she was or what she bought, He Jichu would know it clearly. Gu Nianji stuffed the black card back into He Jichu's hand and frowned. "There's no need for the black card. Why don't you give me some cash?" He Jichu raised his eyebrows. "Cash? How do you use it?" "I'm telling you, we don't have any cash in circulation here. All purchases are made in virtual payments." Gu Nianji was speechless. He stared at Gu Nianji for a while until she turned her head away in embarrassment. He Jichu finally reached out to her. "Give me your phone." Gu Nianji placed the phone in He Jichu's hand. He Jichu looked at it and saw that she had already deleted his locator program. He didn't make it clear and directly called her. He added an unlimited data plan and also opened online banking for her Wuxia bank card. After installing the online payment system, he said, "Okay, I know you think the black card has too much money. There's only 100,000 yuan in this Wuxia bank card. Take it to rent a house and it should be enough for your living expenses for half a year. That should be enough for you to find a job, right?" Gu Nianji nodded repeatedly and felt that He Jichu was so thoughtful. She quickly said, That's enough. When I save enough money, I'll buy you a big gift." He Jichu wasn't short of money, but if Gu Nianji thought about buying him a gift after earning money, he would still be very happy. Even Huo Xiaoheng hadn't enjoyed this kind of treatment. Right? He Jichu was happy and went back to his room to find the book Quantum Physics for Serious. He gave it to her and said, "This was a birthday gift from your father on your 6th birthday." Gu Nianji was speechless. He was really her biological father. He knew she was terrible at physics, but he still used this kind of book to hurt her. After lunch, Gu Nianji pulled her suitcase and put on her sunglasses. She waved happily at He Jichu and left the He family's front door. He Jichu stood on the balcony on the 2nd floor and watched Gu Nianji drag her suitcase as she walked away. He suddenly felt like an empty nest old man. The child had grown up and her wings had hardened. Look how fast she flew. He Jichu, the empty nest old man, watched Gu Nianji get into a car at the door reluctantly. He Qingjin walked over and stood beside him. He whispered, "If Nianji had grown up on our side, she would be at the age to go to university. Yes, just treat it as making up for our shortcomings." He Jichu crossed his arms. "Dad, I haven't been to the military in a long time. I'll be busy soon. You should rest more. Don't tire yourself out." "I know. I'll take good care of myself," He Qingjian said with a smile. "With you sharing my worries, my illness will recover faster." He Jichu turned to look at He Qingjian. Seeing that his complexion was indeed much better than yesterday, he nodded slightly. "Then I'll go to the military." He then asked, "What about Qin Jining? Has the order been given?" "Yes, Qin Jining is driving that car. He will settle down with Nianji first, then go from public to private. In the future he will walk around as a cousin, as a relative." He Qingjian had made very detailed arrangements. He Jichu was also at ease with Qin Jining. "Thank you for your hard work, cousin. I'll treat him to dinner when we settle down." Gu Nianji got into Qin Jining's car and sat in the front passenger seat. Qin Jining was going to be Gu Nianji's bodyguard now. Although he didn't like her very much, he wasn't that dissatisfied anymore. He asked calmly, "Where are you going?" Gu Nianji waved her phone at him. "To the airport." "The airport?" Qin Jining was stunned. "Aren't you going to rent a house and find a job?" Why are you going to the airport? I'm going to rent a house and find a job. Gu Nianji raised her chin. But I'm not going to rent a house and find a job in the imperial capital. The He family was too powerful in the imperial capital, and this place was too close to Qin Yaoguang. Gu Nianji didn't want to breathe in the same haze as her. Then where are you going? Qin Jining was speechless for a long time. He turned the steering wheel and got on the road to the airport highway. Gu Nianji took out her phone and started to book plane tickets. There were a lot of flights from the imperial capital to Sea City. They took half an hour. Gu Nianji asked Qin Jining for his ID number and quickly booked 2 plane tickets. She winked at him and said slyly, "Let's go to Sea City." This was today's big chapter. Chapter 1492, This is really your biological father. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. I'm still wondering if I should add updates at 8 p.m. P.S. Thank you to Heaven, Tang Tang, Shi Irma, and Xan Yangyue for each tipping 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Thank you to Yunhua Yueqing and Lavender Mimi for each tipping 20,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Was there an event yesterday? So many gifts from my relatives, moi. Chapter 1504. Gu Nianji had lived in Sea City for 5 years. She was more familiar with all aspects of Sea City than the imperial capital. She just didn't know how different Sea City was from the other side. When they arrived at the airport, He Jichu and He Qingjian each received a text from Qin Jining saying that he and Gu Nianji were about to board the plane to Sea City. He Jichu didn't say anything and replied with a text, "Protect her well." He Qingjian's reply was even shorter. There were only 3 words, "Got it." Qin Jining bent over and sat beside Gu Nianji. He secretly looked at his phone to see if there were any instructions from his superiors. When he saw the text messages from the 2 of them, he was a little speechless. He put his phone away and turned around to see that Gu Nianji had already stood up in high spirits. He said, "It's time to board the plane." Her suitcase had already been checked in, and she was carrying an orange Hermes platinum bag on her arm. Qin Jining looked up at her and stood up to say deliberately, "This kind of bag looks better on a mature woman." "You're right? You're a little lacking." "Mature woman?" Gu Nianji was deep in thought. "You mean older women, right?" Qin Jining nodded. "You could say that." "Like when Shui?" Gu Nianji tilted her head and smiled slyly. Qin Jining was annoyed. He turned his head and ignored her. He walked to the boarding gate alone. Gu Nianji followed beside him and smiled. "Don't just be angry. I bought you a plane ticket. Remember to pay me back." Qin Jining stopped in his tracks and said coldly, "Your phone number." Gu Nianji gave him a string of numbers. Qin Jining entered his phone and transferred the money for the plane ticket to her. "We don't owe each other anything now." "Yes, yes, yes." Gu Nianji nodded repeatedly and smiled. "That's great. It doesn't hurt money if we don't talk about feelings." Qin Jining didn't say much along the way. Fortunately, it was only 2 or 3 hours from the imperial capital to Sea City. Gu Nianji took a nap. When she woke up, the plane was already about to land. Qin Jining stood up and took his backpack down. He asked, "Do you have a place to stay here?" Gu Nianji thought about it. "Let's find a hotel first, then rent a place." She had lived in Sea City before, and the West District was where the government's main departments were located. The residential areas there were especially expensive, but the facilities were very good. Also, the military base was in the West District and Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng lived there. The northern part of the city was where the rich lived. Most of them were bosses of listed companies and business families. Sea City's financial and high-tech industries were very developed. The Dongqing district was a business district with many skyscrapers. Several of Huaxia's most famous internet companies were located there. The people living in Nanqing district were all ordinary working-class people. The population density here was the highest. Although the houses were also high-rise buildings, they were densely packed together. Each building was erected in a narrow space like a matchbox. The houses were very close to each other. Pushing open the window, he could almost clearly see the people in the opposite building. When Gu Nianji was attending university in Sea City, she had followed her classmates to Nan City to do social research and legal services. Her plan was to rent a small apartment in Nanqing and stay there for the time being. There were many people here and all kinds of signals were mixed up. When she entered Nanqing, it was like a small raindrop falling into the sea. It wasn't that easy to track her or follow her. As long as she sent Qin Jining away, she could enjoy her time alone. Gu Nianji opened the app on her phone and deliberately found a hotel in Bay City. She said, I've booked 2 rooms. How long are you staying here? Qin Jining said nonchalantly, when you settle down I can go back and report back. Is that simple? Gu Nianji looked at him suspiciously. Aren't you going to go underground to protect me from the shadows? Qin Jining. How did you know? Qin Jining felt more and more that Gu Nianji wasn't simple. Did young master he tell you? Gu Nianji rolled her eyes and smiled. Yes, young master he told me. Actually, she had deduced it from Hua Xiaoheng and the others' working conditions. Gu Nianji had already realized that although there were no special operations forces here, Qin Jining's work was similar to that of the special operations forces. Qin Jining narrowed his eyes. Really? You're not lying to me, are you? Of course not. Gu Nianji put away her phone and changed the topic with a serious expression. By the way, help me ask young master he if he can give me a driver's license so I don't have to take the test again. Gu Nianji's heart ached when she thought of the car she had left there. She didn't want to talk to Qin Jining anymore. The two of them got off the plane, rented a car at the airport, and drove to the hotel Gu Nianji had booked. Gu Nianji, who had been chatty and talkative, suddenly stopped talking. Qin Jining wasn't used to it. He glanced at Gu Nianji from time to time, but after trying several times, Gu Nianji pretended to be deaf and dumb and refused to speak, so he stopped asking. Qin Jining was stunned as he drove the car to the hotel in Bay City in silence. You booked a 5-star Hilton hotel? Yes, what's wrong? Gu Nianji pushed open the car door with a dark expression. It's only 5,000 a night. Do you think it's too low? She had booked a cheaper standard room. If it was a presidential suite or something, the 100,000 yuan He Jichu had given her would only be enough for a few nights. Qin Jining trembled. 5,000 a night. Can I check out? I can't. Gu Nianji turned to look at him and laughed. Look at how useless you are. I'll pay for your room today, but tomorrow, you should go back and get me a driver's license. Qin Jining immediately nodded. I can go back now. 5,000 a night? She would get pregnant if she slept there? Gu Nianji snickered. Although this was exactly what she wanted, she still pretended to be troubled. After thinking about it for a long time, she said, Fine then. You go back first. When you come back tomorrow, bring me my driver's license. With that, she dragged her suitcase into the hotel. Qin Jining felt as if he had been pardoned. He drove back to the airport. Qin Jining wasn't particularly worried about Gu Nianji's safety, because he was in the open now. If he left, there would be colleagues who would secretly protect her. On the way, he used his phone to buy a plane ticket. After arriving at the airport, he returned the car and boarded the plane back to the capital. After getting rid of Qin Jining, Gu Nianji breathed a sigh of relief. She first checked out of the room she had booked for Qin Jining at the front desk. She only wanted a standard room. After all, it was a 5-star hotel, so it was fine to check out at the last minute. Gu Nianji took the key card and went upstairs. She asked for the place to eat and took a short rest. It was time for dinner. Just as she was about to go down and find a place to eat, He Jichu called. Nianji, have you checked in already? He Jichu sat in his office and called Gu Nianji with his Bluetooth headset on. Gu Nianji smoothed her hair in the mirror and walked out with her phone in her hand. I just checked in. Brother Little Ning has already returned to the capital. Young master He, can you help me get a driver's license for him to bring over? He Jichu knew that Gu Nianji had a driver's license there, so he nodded and agreed. When little Qin comes back, I'll ask him to bring it over for you. Gu Nianji smiled and thanked him. Is there anything else, young master He? I'm going to have dinner. He Jichu quickly said, hurry up and go eat. Don't starve yourself. Thinking of Gu Nianji's culinary skills, He Jichu reminded her again. After you rent a house, remember to find a part-time helper who knows how to cook. Don't always order takeout. Got it. Gu Nianji made a face at her phone. I won't eat red wine like a meal every day. She was teasing He Jichu that he often drank red wine like a meal over there. He Jichu. You're getting naughtier and naughtier. He Jichu curled his lips, and his sparkling almond-shaped eyes rippled with an intoxicating smile. Gu Nianji walked into the elevator as she called. Thinking that the restaurant where she was eating was on the 4th floor, she glanced around and saw the word 4. She casually pressed the floor. In the end, the elevator slid all the way down to the 4th floor underground before stopping. The elevator door opened, and Gu Nianji saw a very elegant and fashionable corridor. A few well-dressed people walked past her, and the pleasant sound of a piano came from the private room. It sounded very classy. This was a restaurant? Gu Nianji walked out of the elevator and looked for signs everywhere. After looking for a long time, she finally realized that this was the 4th floor underground. There was a dash in front of the 4 she had pressed, but she hadn't noticed it. However, from the looks of it, it seemed to be a place to eat and it was very stylish. Gunyenji was curious and decided to find a place to eat here. She looked at the private rooms one by one. Some of the private rooms were closed, while others had their doors ajar. There weren't many people inside and they were in groups of 3 or 5 sipping wine. There were also many people and it seemed like they were having a party. However, it wasn't noisy and everyone seemed very polite. Gunyenji was almost at the end of the corridor, but she didn't see a place like a restaurant to order food. She was a little disappointed and was about to return to the restaurant on the 4th floor upstairs. There must be a place to order food there. At that moment, the door of a private room was suddenly pushed open. A drunk man came out from inside. He held the door and panted for a while as if he was about to vomit. Gunyenji quickly moved away, not seeming to be affected by the smell of alcohol. The man looked up and in his drunken haze, he saw a girl with a ponytail walk past in front of him. He couldn't see her face but her fair side profile flashed past his eyes, and it was extremely seductive. His gaze followed her and he saw her back. Under a simple white t-shirt, her slender waist could not be grasped, and a pair of long legs covered in blue jeans. They were so straight that it made one's imagination run wild. If such a pair of legs wrapped around his waist, damn, he was actually going to get hard. He wiped his mouth and chased after her. "Miss, are you coming to the stage?" Gunyenji turned around and inexplicably saw a drunk young man walking over. He leaned against the wall and struck what he thought was his most handsome pose, grinning. "What stage?" Gunyenji pointed in the direction of the elevator. "Are you looking for the front desk? Go up from here to the lobby on the 1st floor. The front desk is there." Although the man was drunk, he wasn't drunk to the point of losing consciousness. As soon as he heard Gunyenji's words and then looked at her attire and temperament, he knew he had the wrong person. This girl wasn't a prostitute here. He chuckled and didn't want to retreat. He leaned over and sniffed. "What perfume are you using? Why does it smell so good?" As he spoke, he wanted to block her against the wall. Gunyenji finally understood that she had met a hooligan with bad intentions. In a rage, she suddenly reached out and grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it and pinned it behind him. She dragged him to a place in the corridor where the surveillance cameras couldn't see and kicked him in the knee. The man couldn't stand steadily and knelt down. Gunyenji grabbed his head and slammed it against the wall. "Open your F***king eyes and take a look. How dare you provoke anyone? Are you blind?" Gunyenji was so angry that she punched and kicked the man. Gunyenji, who had grown up with Huashaoheng in the army, had been trained. She was more than enough to deal with this kind of pervert. Besides, the man was already drunk and Gunyenji had pinched the numb tendon on his arm. His head had been hit so hard that he was seeing stars. He was in so much pain that he started wailing like a ghost. The doors of the private rooms were pushed open one after another. Gunyenji saw that she had alarmed someone and immediately ran towards the elevator. However, she heard the alarm in the corridor ring, and there were already guards standing in front of the elevator door. She cursed her bad luck. She didn't want to make a big deal out of it and be scolded by He Qingjian. She didn't want Qin Yaoguang and Wen Shuyi to know that she had caused trouble as soon as she left the He family. In a moment of desperation, the door of a private room opposite suddenly opened. "Come in." A female voice rang out and dragged her in. Gunyenji entered the private room and was about to thank her when she suddenly saw the girl's face. She blurted out as if she had seen a ghost, "Bai Xuan? Why are you here?" The girl, who was wearing a white shirt and black pants and holding a bottle of red wine in her hand, looked at her curiously. "How do you know my name? I don't know you?" This is today's second update, Chapter 1493, Are You Blind? A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. P.S. Here's the update for Lavender Mimi's promotion to the leader of the Alliance last November. I wrote until 2 o'clock in the morning and it was too late to catch the bugs. Mwah. Chapter 1505. Gunyenji clenched her fists reflexively. She was very annoyed at herself for speaking out of turn. This was a parallel universe that corresponded to the other world. What was so strange about seeing people who looked exactly the same? She was still too inexperienced. Gunyenji's mind raced and a reason came out naturally. "Someone knows you and showed me your photo." "Oh, is it someone I know?" Bai Shuang looked at her suspiciously, not really believing her. Gunyenji opened the door of the private room a crack and looked out. She put her finger to her lips and shushed her to stop her from talking. Bai Shuang frowned at her and said, "Don't go out. You just hit someone and got into trouble. That person's family is quite powerful." Gu Nianji smiled and waved her hand. "It's okay. That person won't say that I hit him." "Why not? Do you think he's that kind?" Bai Shuang pursed her lips. "That person is the most lecherous and his family is rich. None of the sisters in the hotel dare to offend him. I wonder how much he has taken advantage of them." Gu Nianji opened the door of the private room a little more and said, "Listen for yourself." Bai Shuang leaned over. The man was helped over by two people. He was talking to the police who had come to investigate and collect evidence. He spat, "Officer, you must catch him and avenge me. That person is a brawny man who is 1.9 meters tall. He weighs about 250 kilograms. His arms are as thick as my thighs and his fists are shockingly big. I resisted with all my might, so he pushed me to the ground." Bai Shuang, she quickly glanced at Gu Nianji. The girl was tall and slender with curves in all the right places. Her appearance was even more delicate and intelligent. How was that a brawny man who was 1.9 meters tall? Had the man outside been beaten silly by this girl? Was he talking nonsense? Gu Nianji saw her doubt and closed the door of the private room tightly with satisfaction. She smiled and said, "This kind of B*TH bullies the weak and fears the strong. He also wants to save face. He won't give me up. Think about it. If his friends find out that he was beaten black and blue by a young girl, how will he be able to show his face in the future? Where's his shame? So the person who beat him up must be a brawny man who is 1.9 meters tall." Gu Nianji puffed out her chest. "A brawny man who's 1.9 meters tall is here. Miss, do you have any objections?" Bai Shuang giggled at her teasing and pinched Gu Nianji's face. "Your little mouth sure knows how to talk. You're also so smart." Gu Nianji also touched Bai Shuang's face and said with a smile, "You flatter me." She quickly glanced at the private room and saw that there were 8 large screens as tall as a person facing the door. They blocked the view of the people entering the room and she could not see who was inside. There was a wine table beside him with all kinds of red wine on it. It looked expensive. The lady in the hotel uniform should be the lady selling red wine. Gu Nianji had a strange expression on her face. She didn't expect that Bai Shuang was actually a bar girl in the hotel. On the other side, although Bai Shuang was implicated by her father and didn't end up well before that, Bai Shuang was the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It was like heaven and earth. Bai Shuang noticed that Gu Nianji was looking at her strangely and asked her in confusion, "Who showed you my photo? Maybe I know him." Gu Nianji sighed inwardly and casually said, "You know him. It's Brother Zhe." "Little Zhe." Bai Shuang's expression became strange. "What's his full name?" "Zhao Liangzi. His name is Zhao Liangzi. I call him Brother Zhe." Gu Nianji randomly made up a story. At that moment, she keenly noticed that there seemed to be someone talking on the other side of the screen in the private room, but it had now quieted down. Her gaze fell on Bai Shuang and saw that her fair and pretty face had actually turned red. Gu Nianji was secretly surprised and couldn't figure out why she was blushing. At that moment, Bai Shuang leaned over and whispered in her ear, "This Zhao Liangzi you're talking about, this Brother Zhe, who is he to you?" Gu Nianji was stunned for a moment and didn't understand what was going on. But when she saw Bai Shuang's expectant face and thought about how Bai Shuang had died tragically in Zhao Liangzi's arms in the other world, the two of them hadn't been able to grow old together after all. Her heart suddenly felt sympathetic. She held Bai Shuang's hand and said word by word, "Brother Zhe is my cousin. He likes you very much. No, he loves you deeply. He will only love you in this life." Bai Shuang never expected this girl to say such a thing. She was stunned. Mr. Zhao is your cousin? Mr. Zhao?" Gu Nianji's heart skipped a beat, and she faintly had a bad feeling. She heard a man in the private room behind the screen chuckle softly. His voice was deep and he seemed to be very stylish. He seemed to pat someone twice and said, "Little Zhe, your cousin is here." The corners of Gu Nianji's mouth twitched. It couldn't be such a coincidence, could it? She closed her eyes and held the handle of the private room door with her hand. A tall and handsome man walked out from the other side of the screen. He was wearing a smoky gray casual suit with the front open, revealing a black t-shirt inside. He wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, and his dark hair was smeared with hair wax, so there wasn't a single strand of hair out of place. He looked like a gold-collar upstart in the city. His appearance overlapped seamlessly with the Zhao Liangzi she was once familiar with. He had a crew cut and wore a military uniform all year round. It was exactly Zhao Liangzi's appearance. Gu Nianji was shocked. "Brother Zhe." She couldn't help but greet him with a trace of joy in her heart. Did Huoxiao send him? Zhao Yangzi looked at Gu Nianji, and a teasing smile appeared on his face. Little cousin? Long time no see. He raised his hand to hold Gu Nianji's arm, opened the door with one hand, and dragged her out of the private room. Gu Nianji's heart pounded, and she desperately hoped that this person was Zhao Yangzi. But looking at the strength of this person's grip on her arm, Gu Nianji regretfully discovered that she was overthinking. This Zhao Yangzi wasn't Brother Zhe from the Special Operations Forces. Zhao Yangzi had accompanied his boss, President Liu, to discuss business today. He hadn't expected that in the blink of an eye, not only would he have a little cousin, but he would also have a lover who loved you deeply. He had wanted to scold the person who had started the rumor and expose her trick in public. But when he came out, he saw that the person who had started the rumor was actually a beautiful little girl. Moreover, when the little girl saw him, her eyes actually lit up as if she was really familiar with him. Zhao Yangzi couldn't help but mutter to himself, did he really have such a beautiful little cousin? Why didn't he have any impression of her? He pulled Gu Nianji to the corridor outside the private room. The crowd that had gathered there earlier had already dispersed. The young man who had been beaten black and blue by Gu Nianji walked past them and staggered a few times, but he didn't identify Gu Nianji. He followed his friend into the elevator and went upstairs. He was probably going to see a doctor. Gu Nianji breathed a sigh of relief. Zhao Yangzi had been watching Gu Nianji intently. He had heard everything she had said to the bar girl at the door. He and President Liu were right in front of the screen, so they had heard everything clearly. At first he didn't pay much attention to it. He only felt that this girl was very interested in the matter of the assailant. Both he and President Liu held back their laughter. In the end he heard his own name. Not only did he hear his own name, but he also heard his cousin say that he loved her deeply. He had no choice but to come out. In the end he was pushed out by President Liu. The lights in the corridor weren't very bright. Zhao Yangzi crossed his arms and looked at Gu Nianji's bewildered expression. The smile on his face grew wider and wider. Little girl, are you new here? Are you also a bar girl here? Gu Nianji, Zhao Yangzi often came to the bar here to drink and discuss business, so he was very familiar with the waiters who served them. However, he had never seen Gu Nianji before, so he thought that she was new here. This incident has taught you to be honest and not to lie. Look how embarrassing it is to be exposed in front of others when you lie. Zhao Yangzi patted Gu Nianji's head calmly. Go back and explain it to Miss Bai. Tell her that you're talking nonsense and that I don't love her deeply. You're joking too much. If my girlfriend hears you, she'll never let you off. Gu Nianji was instantly very disappointed. You have a girlfriend? Zhao Yangzi actually didn't have a girlfriend, but he didn't want to tell this girl. What did it have to do with her whether he had a girlfriend or not? How could he be justified in spreading rumors? Yes. He became cold. That's all I have to say. If you don't say it, I'll say it myself. Gu Nianji pursed her lips and was about to cry. Under the dim light, her big, bright eyes were on the verge of tears. Zhao Yangzi couldn't help but soften his heart. Don't cry. Zhao Yangzi's tone softened. I just told you not to lie. I didn't mean anything else. Gu Nianji continued to look at him, her lips pursed even more. Zhao Yangzi couldn't take it anymore. He waved his hand and frowned. Forget it, forget it. We don't know each other well anyway. Just pretend I didn't hear it. Don't say that in the future. He turned and walked into the private room, gently closing the door. Bai Shuang held a red wine glass and stood by the door absent-mindedly. When she saw Zhao Yangzi come in, she stole a glance at him. When she saw him look over, she quickly looked away and pretended as if nothing had happened. She wiped the wine glass with a soft white cloth. Zhao Yangzi pursed his lips and said politely, Miss Bai, please don't take offense. That lady was just joking. I've already told her. He paused and said, she's not my cousin. The blush on Bai Shuang's face gradually dissipated. She whispered, I know, Mr. Zhao. She was joking with me. Zhao Yangzi nodded and lowered her head. The curve of her neck was incomparably beautiful, and her ears were still flushed. His heart skipped a beat. He smiled and said, give us a few more bottles of red wine. He asked her again, what's your commission? The waitresses all took a certain percentage of their earnings. Bai Shuang composed herself and said, I'll take 15% for the more expensive wine, and only 5% for the cheaper ones. She had only sold a few bottles of medium-priced red wine today, and her commission was less than 10%. She still had to pay the boss, so she didn't get much. The key was that she hadn't earned much money in total this month. Zhao Yangzi smiled and said, "Just give us a few bottles of your 15% commission red wine. President Liu is paying the bill anyway." He winked at her and went in with a smile. Bai Shuang was stunned. She couldn't believe that she had such good luck. She quickly took a few bottles of the most expensive red wine on hand and went in. Zhao Yangzi was sitting next to a tall middle-aged man and talking to him. Bai Shuang recognized this person as Zhao Yangzi's boss, Lu Yuan. "Mr. Zhao, President Liu, these are the wines you ordered." Bai Shuang carefully placed 2 bottles of red wine on the coffee table in front of the two of them and looked at them anxiously. This was almost like forcing them to buy and sell. Bai Shuang was very embarrassed. But this amount of money was just a drop in the bucket for them, right? But to her it was very important. It was the rent she had to pay, the food she had to buy, and her mother's medical expenses. Bai Shuang tried her best to restrain her shame. Zhao Yangzi and President Liu didn't care about these 2 bottles of wine. They let Bai Shuang open it and take a sip. Then they asked someone to leave it in the bar and drink it later. Even if both bottles of wine were sold, Bai Shuang could get a commission of 4,000 yuan from these 2 bottles of wine alone. She breathed a sigh of relief. After paying 1,000 yuan, she could save the remaining 3,000 yuan. After Zhao Yangzi and President Liu finished talking, they shook hands with their partners and agreed to sign the contract tomorrow. "President Liu, you guys continue playing. We'll be leaving first." They stood up. "We're paying the bill today. Everyone have fun." President Liu and Zhao Yangzi walked out of the private room one after another. Bai Shuang also followed them out. Zhao Yangzi turned around and was a little surprised to see her. "Aren't you going to continue selling red wine? The people inside will probably buy more. They can drink more than us." Bai Shuang shook her head uncomfortably and said in a low voice, "They're going to play dirty next. I won't sit on the stage or appear on stage. They won't buy my wine." She sold less than others because she didn't want to sit on the stage or appear on stage. She graduated from a proper university and had her own clerical job during the day. Only at night did she use her rest time to sell red wine to earn some extra money to improve her family's life. If her mother hadn't suddenly fallen ill, Bai Shuang wouldn't have had to come here to sell red wine part-time. However, selling red wine was already her bottom line. She wouldn't sell herself. Zhao Yangzi replied with an "oh," and glanced at Bai Shuang again. For some reason he said, "It's very late. Are you hungry? I'll treat you to supper." Bai Shuang shook her head. "I'm not hungry." "Then where do you live? I'll send you back?" Zhao Yangzi refused to give up. President Liu, who was walking in front of him, looked back at him and smiled. "Little Zay, I'll be leaving first. See you tomorrow." Zhao Yangzi chuckled and waved his hand. "See you tomorrow, President Liu." Bai Shuang's face turned even redder. "No need, I've already called a taxi." Her voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible. Zhao Yangzi handed her his business card. "Then I'll be leaving." After Gu Nianji came up from the 4th floor, she didn't rush back to her room. Instead, she went to the restaurant to eat. She ordered a bowl of rice mixed in a stone pot and ate it with a plate of sour and spicy shredded radish. After taking 2 bites, she saw Bai Shuang walking over. She also ordered a bowl of rice mixed in a stone pot and took it away. Gu Nianji smiled and waved at Bai Shuang. "Miss Bai, over here." Bai Shuang turned her head and saw Gu Nianji. She came over with a food box. "You're here? I didn't see you just now. I thought I'd never see you again." Gu Nianji smiled and said, "How could that be? We're fated to meet." Bai Shuang smiled and said, "Mr. Zhao said you're not his cousin." Gu Nianji bit her chopsticks in embarrassment and her eyes drifted. "I was just joking. Miss Bai, don't take it to heart." She gestured for Bai Shuang to sit down. "You also bought rice mixed in a stone pot? Come, let's eat together." Bai Shuang shook her head. "This is for my mother. My mother loves to eat this, but we haven't had such delicious food in a long time." The Hilton Hotel restaurant's stone pot rice was twice as expensive as other places, but Bai Shuang's mother loved it. Bai Shuang had earned some money today and decided to buy a bowl for her mother to enjoy. Gu Nianji looked at the stone pot rice in front of her and shrank her neck. She had just complained that it wasn't delicious and wanted to throw away half of it. The two exchanged a few pleasantries. Bai Shuang asked for Gu Nianji's name, and the two exchanged phone numbers before leaving. Gu Nianji finished dinner and came out of the restaurant. She saw that Zhao Yangzi had also come over. "Huh? Little cousin, you came to eat alone?" Zhao Yangzi looked at her carefully and suddenly realized that she was definitely not a bar girl. Just the money on her wrist was enough for someone like Bai Shuang to buy 100 years' worth of red wine. She was also wearing a t-shirt, jeans and sneakers. They looked ordinary but they were all luxury brands. Gu Nianji saw that Zhao Liangzi also had a girlfriend and didn't like him very much. She said calmly, "Who are you? Do I know you? Don't try to get close to me. Aren't you afraid that your girlfriend won't be happy and won't let you off?" This is today's big chapter of 4,500 words, chapter 1494, We're fated to meet. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. I only slept for 4 hours yesterday, so I have to go to bed early today. It's almost midnight. Mwah. Chapter 1506. Zhao Liangzi rubbed his nose. He thought that this little girl was too eloquent. Didn't he just say that she was lying to his face? Could it be that he was wrong? But of course it seemed like he was lying too. He told her that he had a girlfriend, so she was unhappy and kept nagging about it. Could it be that this little girl actually had a crush on him? Was that why she was dissatisfied with the fact that he had a girlfriend? Zhao Liangzi studied Gu Nianji. He couldn't remember when he had seen her before. She was so beautiful. If he had seen her before, even if it was just a glance in the crowd, he would definitely have an impression of her. Zhao Liangzi thought about it and sat down in front of Gu Nianji. He smiled and asked, "What's your name? Have I seen you before?" Gu Nianji looked up at him, then calmly looked away. "I haven't seen you before. I mistook you for someone else." "You mistook me for someone else? But you know my name is Zhao Liangzi." Zhao Liangzi rubbed his chin and looked at her thoughtfully. "Don't tell me you know someone who not only looks like me but also has the same name as me?" After saying that, he laughed. "This is too unbelievable. So little girl, I'll say it again, don't lie. You're so young and you're so beautiful. What's wrong with learning to lie?" Gu Nianji was so angry she wanted to scratch Zhao Liangzi with her claws. At this moment she began to understand He Zhichu's feelings on their side. He knew everything but he couldn't say anything. It wasn't that he couldn't say it. It was just that no one would believe him if he said it, so he might as well not say it. This was truly a grieving. Gu Nianji also understood why the higher-ups on this side insisted on removing the memories of the middle and lower-level soldiers who had gone to the other world to carry out missions. This was because ordinary people did not know that there was a parallel universe outside of this universe. Gu Nianji took a deep breath. Her big eyes darted around slightly, and she quietly changed the subject. "Did you know Bai Shuang before?" Zhao Liangzi remembered the hostess and said with a smile, "Not bad, I guess we know each other. We often go there to discuss business and sometimes she comes to our booth to sell red wine." Gu Nianji nodded and said casually, "What about your girlfriend? Is his surname also Bai?" She suspected that Zhao Liangzi's girlfriend in this world was Bai Yueran. If it was true, then it would be interesting. Unexpectedly, Zhao Liangzi stood up with a smile and said, "If you're so concerned about whether I have a girlfriend or not, I'll suspect that you have a crush on me." Gu Nianji almost spat out the stone pot rice she had just eaten. She hurriedly said, "You can eat whatever you want but you can't say whatever you want. When did I have a crush on you? You're already so old and I'm only 19. I can have a crush on anyone but you." Zhao Liangzi was speechless. Although he didn't have any special feelings for Gu Nianji, he was still upset that a beautiful girl called him old. Zhao Liangzi said unhappily, "I'm only 27 years old. Why am I so old? Besides, I don't have a girlfriend. Don't add scenes for me." 27 years old and you still don't have a girlfriend? Gu Nianji looked him up and down. "Is there something wrong with you? You're the one with a problem." Zhao Liangzi was furious. "I don't have a girlfriend because I have high standards. You're really unreasonable." He was so angry that he turned around and left. After leaving the hotel, she remembered that she had gone in to buy supper for President Liu. Fine, he had actually forgotten what he was going to do because of a few words from the little girl. This was the first time for Zhao Liangzi. He shook his head with a bitter smile, turned around and walked back. Gu Nianji had just finished eating and paid the bill when she came out of the restaurant. She bumped into Zhao Liangzi again. She couldn't help laughing. "Mr. Zhao, we're really fated." Zhao Liangzi was originally very angry, but when he saw this infuriating little girl smile at him, it was like the first bud of a rare flower, like a dewy begonia. It was simply able to sweep away all the accumulated anger and discomfort in his heart. His mood improved and he reached out his hand to her. "All right, we didn't get to know each other until we fought. Come, let me reintroduce myself. I'm Zhao Liangzi, the technical director of the Liu Corporation. Mr. Zhao is so amazing." Gu Nianji's eyes lit up. She reached out and shook Zhao Yangzi's hand. What kind of technical director are you? Computer network system. Zhao Yangzi took out his business card. Our Lu Corporation is the strongest company in the entire Wuxia Empire's network security system. Of course, this is only part of our company's business. As expected. Gu Nianji sighed in her heart. Although he didn't have the support of the Special Operations Forces, Zhao Yangzi was still a big shot in the computer network system. She took Zhao Yangzi's business card and looked at it before putting it in her pocket. Thank you, I'm going back. She waved her hand and was about to slip away. Zhao Yangzi grabbed her arm. Little girl, you've almost gotten all the information out of me. You haven't said anything yet. Where's your business card? Gu Nianji looked at him and blinked innocently. My name is Sirius. I just graduated from university and haven't found a job yet. Where did I get a business card? She flipped and turned her wrist like a fish. She broke free from Zhao Yangzi's shackles and flashed into the elevator opposite the restaurant's entrance. Zhao Yangzi watched the elevator door slowly close. Gu Nianji made a face at him inside. He shook his head in amusement and anger. He went into the restaurant to buy supper for the big boss. Gu Nianji returned to the room she had booked and had a good night's sleep. When she woke up the next morning, she was woken up by He Jichu's phone ringing. She yawned and sat up. She picked up her phone and swiped it open. Hello, young Master He. It's so early. What's the matter? Qin Jining had returned to the imperial capital yesterday and asked He Jichu for Gu Nianji's driver's license. He Jichu had gotten someone to do it for her overnight. He had Qin Jining bring it over early this morning. Looking at the time, it was already 10 in the morning. Qin Jining's plane should have arrived in Sea City by now, but Gu Nianji was still sleeping. However, He Jichu didn't blame her. She had adapted well, so He Jichu could only be happy. How could he say that she had slept in? He Jichu's fingers caressed Gu Nianji's lazy face on the phone screen a few times. His cold and clear voice was extremely restrained. It's getting late. It's already 10 o'clock. He Jichu paused. Qin Jining brought your driver's license over. He'll probably be here soon. Gu Nianji came back to her senses and rubbed her forehead with her hand. She smiled and said, that was fast. Thank you, young Master He. He Jichu smiled. How was your time in Sea City? When are you going to come back? Gu Nianji, she pulled a strand of hair with her hand and played with it for a while. She curled her lips and said, I haven't found a job yet. When I find a job and have a holiday, I'll go back to the imperial capital to see you. I'll be waiting. He Jichu hung up after a few words because he had a meeting to attend. He had only been back for 2 days and he was already really busy. Gu Nianji turned off her phone. She had only laid back for a few minutes when she heard the doorbell ring. Qin Jining's figure appeared on the video monitor by the bedside. Gu Nianji sighed, got dressed and got up. She opened the door and let Qin Jining in. Qin Jining placed his driver's license in her hand and said, it's all done. With her driver's license, the first thing Gu Nianji did was, of course, to buy a car. Brother Little Ning, let's go find a 4S store and see if there are any cheap and good cars, okay? Gu Nianji smiled sweetly. Her big smile dazzled Qin Jining and he couldn't help agreeing. It was already noon when Gu Nianji washed up and had breakfast. When she arrived at the largest 4S store in Sea City, it was already noon. Gu Nianji planned to make a down payment and use the car loan to buy a mid-priced car. After walking around the 4S store, he reluctantly moved his gaze from a bright red Ferrari to a mid-priced Audi. The car looked good and was sturdy and durable, but it consumed a little fuel. However, Gu Nianji was only using it as a car to get to work. She didn't drive long distances, so the fuel consumption was negligible. I'll take this one. Gu Nianji looked at the price. It was a domestic Audi, only 160,000 yuan. She made a down payment of 60,000 yuan and planned to take out a loan of 100,000 yuan. Qin Jining saw this from the side and pulled her to the side. He said, you're only short of 100,000 yuan. Why do you want a loan? Because I don't have enough money. Gu Nianji blinked, speechless. She had money, why would she take out a loan? Was this person's head made of stone? Solid? Qin Jining looked up at the crystal lights on the roof of the 4S store. The loan interest rate for this kind of store is too high. It's not worth it. How about this, I'll lend you 100,000 yuan. You don't have to pay back the interest. You can pay it back whenever you have the money. If Qin Jining had told her not to pay it back, Gu Nianji definitely wouldn't have agreed to lend him the money. However, he said that she didn't have to pay back the interest. Gu Nianji didn't think it would be a problem when she had the money to pay back the principal. She nodded. Thank you then. I don't have any credit history right now. If I take out a loan, the interest rate will indeed be very high. Qin Jining smiled. Gu Nianji wasn't bad. She wasn't the kind of person who was pedantic. He gave her his card and swiped another 100,000 yuan. In total, he bought the car for 160,000 yuan. Qin Jining helped Gu Nianji with the formalities and used his connections to get the license plate directly. Gu Nianji didn't have to wait alone for long before Qin Jining finished all the formalities and handed the car keys to Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji was overjoyed. She took Qin Jining out for a few rounds to familiarize herself with the streets and alleys of Sea City. The layout of the city here was very similar to the Sea City she had stayed in before. Although there was no Special Operations Forces base, there was still a military base. The general direction was not bad. Gu Nianji drove the car around. It looked very familiar. It really didn't look like it was her first time in Sea City. Qin Jining was secretly surprised but didn't say anything. After returning to the hotel, Gu Nianji said to Qin Jining, I can settle down now. I'll submit my resume tonight and then look for a house to move. Brother Little Ning, you can go now. You're burning the bridge after crossing the river. Qin Jining knocked her on the head and smiled. I'll leave when you find a job and rent a house. Gu Nianji nodded with an eager expression. I'll do it as soon as possible. She had never experienced a serious interview in the other world, but it wasn't difficult for Gu Nianji, who had a very strong learning ability. She had gained experience after a few interviews. In fact, her chances of getting an interview were quite high. She had submitted a total of 5 resumes. 4 large law firms and 1 small law firm had all gotten an interview. But the strange thing was that the 4 large law firms had praised her profusely during the interview, but they had rejected her when they went back to do a background check. Gu Nianji's intuition told her that there was something wrong, but she held back her anger and refused to beg the He family. She didn't even mention a word to He Jichu. The last interview. She looked at her schedule and sneered. If anyone dares to play tricks again, I won't be polite. This was the first update of the day, chapter 1495, I won't be polite. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. We'll continue to reward and update at 8 p.m. P.S. Thank you Beth1211 for the 10,000 Chidian coins. Mwah. Chapter 1507. Gu Nianji looked at the interview notice in her mailbox and shook her head speechlessly. She had only casually applied for this kind of small law firm to make up the numbers. She had never thought that she would have to go for an interview one day. But now, this small law firm had become her last straw of hope. She turned on her phone to look for the interview address. Upon closer inspection, this small law firm's location was not bad. It was in the eastern part of the city, where large companies gathered. It wasn't far from the Hilton Hotel where she was staying. Gu Nianji walked there. However, after arriving, she realized that this law firm couldn't be any smaller. The law firm was located on the 2nd floor of a 36-story building. It was a small company with only 2 rooms. She went in and saw the person for the interview. Oh, it was really someone she knew. It was Lawyer Jean, who had once lost to her. Of course, it was Lawyer Jean on this side, not Lawyer Jean on the other side. However, before Lawyer Jean on the other side lost to her, he was a top lawyer at a first-rate law firm. Later, he was fired because of a series of mistakes and lawsuits, so he went to work at He Jichu's law firm. Lawyer Jean on this side was obviously different from the other side. He was very amiable and explained the situation of the law firm clearly the moment they met. He also said that he thought she wouldn't come for the interview because with her education and the school she graduated from, she was definitely going to enter the best law firm in Sea City. Miss Gu, I won't hide it from you. I opened this law firm myself. It's a small business and the lawsuits are all trivial divorce cases. Those large mergers and acquisitions, economic cases, or criminal cases don't have a chance to be handled by a small law firm like ours. Would you be willing to come? Gu Nianji smiled and said honestly, if you don't want me, I really don't have anywhere else to go. What? This was also what Lawyer Jean was most puzzled about. Your education is very good. I offended someone? Those big law firms are concerned about connections, so they all rejected me. Gu Nianji also laid her cards on the table. I don't know if you mind my situation. She suspected that the person behind this was most likely Wen Shui or Qin Yaoguang. Their goal was to prove that she was nothing after leaving the He family. Gu Nianji actually wanted to grab that Miss Wen's wooden head and smash it against the wall a few times. She wanted to tell her that she didn't want the He family to help her, but that didn't mean that the He family had to become her obstacle. However, Gunyanji wouldn't lower her head to them even if she had to. Lawyer Jean put down his pen in surprise. Did you offend someone? But you just graduated from school, right? How did he offend someone? Do you think they can stop you from entering a big law firm? Gunyanji replied casually, I offended a rich kid at school, so I got bullied. So that's how it is. Lawyer Jean was filled with righteous indignation. I was the same back then. So I couldn't find a job anywhere. In the end, I could only open a small law firm to make a living. Gunyanji, damn it, she was just making it up. Gunyanji really wanted to give herself a thumbs up for being able to unite against a common enemy. Look at her luck. She would always show you a little bit of the golden edge of the dark clouds when a large dark cloud was about to strike. She would give you a little bit of hope that you could see but could not touch. She would numb you and destroy your fighting spirit. Gunyanji made a face inside and immediately said, I already have a lawyer's license. You won't lose out if you hire me. I will work very hard to find cases for the station. Of course, Lawyer Jean couldn't ask for more. His small law firm had been open for 10 years, and he had accumulated some connections in the middle and lower class households. Although he didn't earn much, he was much better than the average salaryman. Recently, there had been more and more business. He really couldn't handle it alone, so he wanted to find a capable helper. The two of them hit it off and immediately signed an employment contract. Lawyer Jean gave her a starting salary of 8,000 yuan a month. After half a year, her salary could be adjusted again depending on her performance. The year-end bonus was 2 months' salary, and there was a certain commission for large cases. 5 insurance and 1 housing fund were provided. It could be said that it was a very sincere contract. Then he called the building management office to make an electronic door number for her so that she could take the elevator freely. Gunyanji calmly looked at the floor, the second floor. She needed to take the elevator? Welcome to Jin's law firm. Lawyer Jean smiled so widely that his eyes couldn't be seen. He shook her hand. Maybe we'll become partners in the future. When can you start work? Thank you for thinking so highly of me, boss. I can come to work tomorrow. Gunyanji's mouth was very sweet. I will continue to work hard. She took the contract and happily walked out of the door of Jin's law firm. Because it was only the second floor, she couldn't be bothered to wait for the elevator and went straight down the stairs. When she returned to the hotel, Qin Jining was in her room holding his phone. She didn't know who he was talking to, but the expression on his face was exceptionally gentle and affectionate. Gunyanji's expression changed slightly. He was calling Wen Shuyi, wasn't he? How could she have forgotten about that? So there was a spy by her side who had told Wen Shuyi about the law firm she was interviewing for here, right? Gunyanji was in a bad mood, so she wouldn't let anyone else be in a good mood, especially the person who had secretly done something to make her feel bad. Her emotions came on a whim. By the time she sat down in front of Qin Jining with a sullen face, tears were already streaming down her face like a broken string of beads. They hung on her fair and delicate skin, like a pear blossom in the rain, delicate and moving. Qin Jining looked up and was shocked. What's wrong? What happened? He forgot to hang up the phone. When Shuyi heard him and quickly asked, Ning, what's wrong? Who are you talking to? It's Miss Gu. Qin Jining wanted to hang up the phone, but Gunyanji also spoke. She asked, Brother Little Ning, who are you talking to? Shuyi. Qin Jining felt like he was a microphone, passing messages between Wen Shuyi and Gunyanji. Gunyanji nodded and wiped her tears with a tissue. She said pitifully, Really? Brother Little Ning, you should go. You're too big and my temple is too small. I can't afford to keep you. What do you mean? Qin Jining was anxious and quickly hung up the phone. He leaned forward and asked, What happened? What happened? You're asking me? Gunyanji glared at Qin Jining. It's all your fault. You told everyone about my interview. Now, someone has ulterior motives and those law firms have all rejected me. Are you satisfied? Are you happy? Qin Jining let out an ah, and turned his head away guiltily. Well, maybe you're not capable enough. How can you blame others? Although he said that, he knew in his heart that it wasn't the real reason. With Gunyanji's education, ability, and lawyer's license, how could she not even get a junior position at a large law firm? Really? Gunyanji scoffed. Don't try to change the subject. Did you tell anyone else about my interview? You just have to answer yes or no. Qin Jining fell silent and didn't dare speak. Then don't say anything. Gunyanji began to reason logically. Did you tell Wen Shuyi? Qin Jining pursed his lips. He wanted to defend himself, but he had indeed told Wen Shui, so he didn't say anything. I'm not wrong, am I? Gu Nianji stood up, picked up the pillow from the sofa, and hit Qin Jining hard on the head. As she hit him, she cried, "Do you know how hard it was for me to get the interview? During the interview they clearly said that they would want me, but the other party didn't want me after a background check. You're saying that I'm not capable enough? Let me tell you, if I wasn't capable enough, the other party wouldn't have done a background check at all." Gu Nianji gave Qin Jining the middle finger and said fiercely, "I hate that insidious girlfriend of yours, Wen Shui. She's trying to kill me." Qin Jining grabbed Gu Nianji's hand to stop her from making such gestures. He said unhappily, "Yes, I told Wen Shui, but she's not that kind of person. She won't interfere in your business." Really? You dare call her and confront her face to face? Gu Nianji pointed at Qin Jining's phone. Call her and ask her if she's familiar with the people from the 4 law firms. She'll definitely lie to you and say she's not familiar with them. Qin Jining picked up his phone doubtfully. He had seen Gu Nianji's hopeful and disappointed expression for the past 2 days with his own eyes. He couldn't help sympathizing with her. After some thought he called Wen Shui. As soon as he dialed, Wen Shui immediately picked up. Qin Jining had suddenly hung up the phone just now. She had called but hadn't picked up. She felt a little uneasy and had been waiting for his call. When she saw that he had called, she immediately picked up and asked, "Ning, what happened?" Qin Jining's voice was very calm. She couldn't tell what had happened. He asked calmly, "Shui, are you very familiar with these 4 law firms?" He said the names of the 4 law firms, and when Shui denied it. "I'm not familiar with them." "What's wrong?" Qin Jining looked at Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji showed Qin Jining the news report she had found. She had found it on the internet. It was the main investor of these 4 law firms. Among these 4 law firms, 3 of them had a common major shareholder, Qin Yaoguang. There was also a law firm with a major shareholder surnamed Qin. Judging from the name, she should also be a member of the Qin family and a relative of Qin Yaoguang. These 4 law firms are so close to Mrs. Qin. Would you believe Wen Shui if she said she wasn't familiar with them? Gu Nianji deliberately said loudly for Wen Shui, who was on the other end of the phone. Wen Shui panicked and quickly said, "Ning, don't listen to Gu Nianji's nonsense. Mrs. Qin isn't familiar with those law firms at all. The shares she holds are all held on behalf of the Qin family. You even know about the shares on behalf of others, and you still dare to say you're not familiar with them?" Gu Nianji immediately asked. "We didn't even mention it, so why are you thinking about the shares?" "Haha, Miss Wen, it's not bad for you to hide behind the scenes and enjoy the thrill of the storm, right?" Gu Nianji simply shouted into Qin Jining's phone, "You messed up all my interviews. You didn't even let go of the last small law firm. How much do you hate me? How much do you not want me to get a job?" When Shui retorted instinctively, "What does your last interview with that small law firm have to do with me? You didn't get a job because you weren't capable enough. Then you're admitting that other than the last interview with the small law firm, which had nothing to do with you, you were the one who messed up the first 4 big law firms' interviews?" Gu Nianji took the opportunity to dig a hole. "Then shouldn't I thank you for showing mercy?" This is today's second update, Chapter 1496, Meeting an Old Friend Again. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. This is for the 50,000 Chidian dollars that President Jiyu rewarded last month. Moi. Chapter 1508. When Shui was obviously stunned for a moment, but she quickly calmed down. "I don't know what you're talking about. It's none of my business which interview you got. It's because of your own ability that they didn't hire you. I used to say that you relied on others to climb your way up, but you didn't believe me. Do you believe me now? Don't avoid the question. I'll find out if it was you or not." Gu Nianji became unfathomable. "When Shui, don't blame me for not reminding you. I'm indeed a narrow-minded person who will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. If you want to mess with me, you'd better kill me. Otherwise, as long as I'm alive, I won't let you off." When Shui wanted to throw her phone away, she sneered and said, "Your threat is enough to call the police. I've already recorded it. If this happens again, I'll call the police." "Sure." Gu Nianji propped her head up with her hand and said lazily, "So you recorded your phone call with Brother Little Ning. Are you always preparing receipts as evidence to present in court?" "Unfortunately, recordings can't be used as evidence unless it's a call from the notary office." "You don't know what you're talking about. When Shuyi squeezed out the words from between her teeth, Qin Jining didn't want the two of them to quarrel. He held his phone and said to Gun Yanji, "I'll give you an explanation for this." He wasn't someone who didn't understand the ways of the world. Since the Qin family had such a relationship with these four major law firms, it would only take a moment for Wen Shuyi to do something to trip Gun Yanji up. He was already 80% to 90% convinced. Qin Jining walked out to the corridor with his phone and lit a cigarette. His voice was slightly cold. "Shuyi, let me ask you again. Did Nianji's rejection of the interview have anything to do with you?" When Shuyi's heart skipped a beat. Qin Jining had never spoken to her like this before, and this attitude made her even more uneasy. She held her phone and looked at Qin Yaoguang's ward. Looking through the half-open door, she could only see that the people inside had just sat down and looked like they were going to have a long talk. She bit her lip and whispered to Qin Jining, "Ah Ning, you don't believe me and only believe Gun Yanji?" "I believe in evidence." Qin Jining's emotions were very complicated. "We're all adults and we've been in society for so many years. You want me to believe you just because you say you don't have it? Shuyi, am I too stupid in your heart, or do you think I'm not important enough to know the truth? Men and women in love are most afraid of being deceived. The best weapon to cool down a relationship is betrayal." When Shuyi was angry and anxious, she said angrily, "You've only been with Gun Yanji for a few days, yet you trust her so much and don't trust me?" Her heart turned cold. She couldn't believe that Gun Yanji was back. Even Qin Jining was leaving her. She had once deeply believed that this man would never leave her. No matter what she did to him, no matter whether he was in her heart or not, this man would love her and protect her for the rest of his life. Had she overestimated this man's infatuation with her? Or was Gun Yanji simply too good at seducing men? She was only a 19-year-old girl, but she was already so unrestrained. When Shuyi's contempt for Gun Yanji was at its peak. But no matter how much she looked down on Gun Yanji, she couldn't let go of Qin Jining. When Shuyi rubbed her temples and her voice became even lower, she smiled bitterly and said, "Ah Ning, I didn't want to tell you about this, but since you asked me yourself, I can't hide it from you even if I have to hide it from everyone." Qin Jining's expression turned cold inch by inch. "So you were really behind Gun Yanji's rejection of the interview? Don't make it sound so bad," Wen Shuyi said sullenly. "How capable can I be? Why would they listen to me?" "Then what do you mean?" Qin Jining frowned. "You admitted it just now." "Did I admit it?" Wen Shuyi couldn't help it. "You're indeed quite stupid. I was the one who made the call, but I wasn't the one who wanted to make the call. Her own mother didn't want her to get a good job and you're blaming me for that?" "Huh? You mean Auntie Qin asked you to do it?" Qin Jining's eyes widened in shock. "Why did she do that? Nianji is her biological daughter." Wen Shuyi scoffed. "Why are you guys still so stubborn? Auntie Qin has said so many times that she doesn't treat her like her own daughter. She's disobedient now, and Auntie Qin said she wanted to teach her a lesson so that she wouldn't have a good life outside. Naturally, she would think of the good life at home. Don't interfere. This has nothing to do with you and me. Don't get caught up in the fight between mother and daughter." After a pause, she reminded Qin Jining, "You and I are the ones who got caught up in the fight." Qin Jining fell silent. After a long while, he asked, "Is it really Auntie Qin? If you don't believe me, call her or ask General He yourself." Wen Shuyi was impatient. Auntie Qin asked General He for instructions. General He acquiesced. "It's still my fault." Qin Jining now understood that Gun Yanji's bad luck this time was all thanks to him. If he hadn't been nosy and told Wen Shuyi that Gun Yanji had received an interview notice from the four major law firms, she wouldn't have been so unlucky. Wen Shuyi understood what he meant and knew that he was blaming her. Of course he was blaming her as well. She couldn't say that it was wrong. It was indeed because Qin Jining had proudly praised Gun Yanji when he was chatting with Wen Shuyi on the phone that Wen Shuyi had, accidentally, let it slip and told Qin Yaoguang. The atmosphere in Qin Yaoguang's ward was no less relaxed than outside. There were some visitors in her ward. The nurse cut them some fruit and brought it over. She smiled and said, "Old Mr. Qin, please sit here." "Dad, why are you here?" Qin Yaoguang pressed the button on the bed and pushed the bed up. Her face was pale as she sat on the bed. Sitting in front of her was an old man with white hair and a ruddy face. His eyes were big and bright, but the expression on his face was very serious. Old Master Qin was the current head of the Qin family and Qin Yaoguang's father. "Yaoguang, I heard that Nianji is back. Did you treat her badly?" Master Qin's face was very solemn as he played with the 2 iron walnuts that had been wrapped in starch in his hands unhurriedly. You don't love your own daughter, but you push her away and take a gardener's daughter as your baby. Are you out of your mind? Old Master Qin had just arrived in the imperial capital from Z City. It was said that he was here to see his long-lost granddaughter. Qin Yaoguang frowned and avoided the topic. What do you mean by out of your mind? Watch your words. Yes, she's back. She's been back for almost 2 weeks. What's wrong? Aren't you here to see me? She extended her hand, which was still wrapped in a white bandage, to Old Master Qin. This is all thanks to her. As soon as she came back, she cut my hand. Didn't she resist because you wanted to operate on her? Old Master Qin glared at her. I think you're asking for it, Dad. I'm your biological daughter. Qin Yaoguang called out in a drawn-out voice. She was almost 50 years old, yet she was still acting coquettishly in front of her father. Old Master Qin's entourage had goosebumps. Old Master Qin only had this one daughter in his life, and she had worked hard since she was young. He did indeed dote on her a lot. The only dissatisfaction was probably her attitude towards his daughter. You also know that you're my biological daughter? Don't you know what your biological daughter is like? Old Master Qin didn't hesitate to knock Qin Yaoguang down. You're already so old, yet you still don't know the severity of things. You only have this one child. No matter how much you don't like her father, she's your biological daughter. Qin Yaoguang pursed her lips and leaned against the hospital bed. She said lightly, I've also said it before. The biological child I approve of should be a child born from mutual love. Does she deserve it? You're her biological mother, and you personally carried her for 10 months. She's the only surviving child, Old Master Qin said meaningfully. I thought you would value her very much. I know, so what? It only proves that the experiment was successful. Qin Yaoguang shrugged, her expression very indifferent. Don't tell me I still have to pour maternal love into my house of lab rats? Dad, do you think this is fair to me? My job is to do experiments. My dream is to find a scientific and efficient treatment method to overcome all kinds of difficult and complicated diseases. Qin Yaoguang turned her head away. It was that lunatic Gu Xiangwen who suggested doing the experiment, but I was the one who did the follow-up work. I failed so many times and it wasn't easy for me to succeed once. Are you satisfied? Now that you remember that Nianji is a human being, you immediately threw all the mess to me and turned around to accuse me of being inhumane. I'm sorry, I'm just like that. I can't have maternal love for experimental equipment and objects. Qin Yaoguang straightened her neck and her face was red with anger. Old Master Qin was almost speechless. Evil creature. You evil creature. Old Master Qin pointed at her and coughed violently. Come with me to apologize to Nianji. You can't be like this in the future. No matter what, she's young Master He's fiancé. For Nianji's sake, for the He family's sake, treat her better. Old Master Qin fainted as he spoke, scaring Qin Yaoguang so much that she almost fell off the hospital bed. Dad, don't scare me? Are you okay? Call the doctor. Call the doctor. This was the Qin Corporation's private hospital. The chairman of the board of directors suddenly fell ill in his own hospital and immediately received first-class treatment. When Shui watched as the doctor ran in and pushed Old Master Qin out, she quickly said into the phone, I still have something to do. Talk to you later. She quickly hung up the phone and ran into Qin Yaoguang's ward. Qin Yaoguang ordered her with a cold expression, Get me discharged. I want to be discharged. Qin Jining returned to Gu Nianji's hotel room and looked down at his phone. His heart was in turmoil. Gu Nianji looked at him with disdain and said, You can go. I'm moving away today too. Where are you moving to? Qin Jining leaned against the door awkwardly. I'll send you there. I'm going to rent a house, Gu Nianji said as she began to pack her suitcase. She had already spent 15,000 yuan in the 3 days she had stayed here. She only had the 100,000 yuan He Jichu had given her. She had spent 60,000 yuan on the car and 15,000 yuan on the hotel. In addition to the food and things she had bought for the past few days, she only had about 20,000 yuan left. It was only enough for her to rent a small one-bedroom house in a cheaper residential area in Nanqing district. Gu Nianji had already made an appointment online to look at the house today. If it was ready, she could move in immediately. Qin Jining felt guilty. Although Gu Nianji had rebuked him, he didn't take it to heart. He followed her to Nanqing district to look at the house and watched her sign a half-year rental contract with the landlord. The small house here cost 3,000 yuan a month. After paying half a year's rent and deposit, Gu Nianji only had 2,000 yuan left in her bank card. The house had simple furniture so it was okay to live in, but she still had to buy some daily necessities. Qin Jining followed her to the supermarket to buy kitchen utensils and bathroom supplies. Gu Nianji's taste in shopping was more picky. Qin Jining helped her pay for the whole set, which cost nearly 10,000 yuan. Gu Nianji was in too much debt to worry about. She said nonchalantly, "Put it on the account. I'll pay you back 110,000 yuan when I have the money." Qin Jining. Gu Nianji rented a house, bought daily necessities and some simple furniture, and decorated the house. It looked a little like her apartment over there. The second-hand house that she had bought with her own money. Qin Jining saw that she had settled down, so he went from light to dark and hid in Sea City. Gu Nianji began her 9-to-5 life as an office worker. The work at the law firm was very simple. In the first month of her work, Jin Dezhuang only asked her to familiarize herself with the cases here, understand the applicable laws, and see if there were any mistakes in the previous cases. She just had to write him a memo. She didn't have to worry about receiving clients and contacting new clients for the time being. She just had to learn from him. Jin Dezhuang was a very good boss. He gave her the opportunity and time to learn. Like a teacher in school, he couldn't wait to teach her step by step. Gu Nianji also studied very seriously. She wanted to figure out how the legal system here was different from the other side so that she could really carry out her work and not make a fool of herself. In her spare time, she used her phone to surf the internet to understand the situation in the world. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy could you win 100 battles. Gu Nianji had always remembered Hua Xiaoheng's words. It was fine if she didn't make a move, but once she made a move she had to have absolute confidence in killing the other party. Soon Gu Nianji's first week at work passed peacefully. It was another Monday. When Gu Nianji woke up that morning she felt cold. She pushed open the window and stretched out her hand. It seemed to have suddenly become cold outside. Autumn had officially arrived. The leaves of the ginkgo tree were scattered all over the street like small fans. It was just like the ginkgo tree at the entrance of Hua Xiaoheng's Special Operations Force's residence. Gu Nianji stared blankly at the street for a while and closed the window tightly. After washing up, she changed into a peach-colored wool cardigan and a black wool pencil skirt. She carried her Hermes platinum bag out the door. "Miss Gu, you're going to work?" The neighbor greeted her with a smile. "Have you had breakfast? I have fried rice cakes and Zilong Bao here. I also have pan-fried rice cakes. Do you want something a little smaller?" Gu Nianji smiled and shook her head. She learned to speak Sea City's dialect. "I've eaten. Thank you, Granny." Okay. This bag is really beautiful. Where did you buy it? How much did it cost?" Gu Nianji blinked and said calmly, "This is a high-grade imitation I bought. It cost 1 or 2,000 yuan. The Hermes platinum bag that was worth hundreds of thousands of yuan wore a high-grade imitation hat and squatted in the corner, shivering. She drove to the Dongqing district. The building where she worked was called the Lu Building. It had a total of 36 floors and towered into the clouds. After parking the car, she didn't take the elevator. She took the stairs directly from the underground parking lot to the second floor. It was convenient and fast, and she could also exercise. She arrived a little late because of the traffic jam today. However, Jin Dezhuang didn't particularly care about attendance. When he saw her arrive, he just nodded casually and said, "I'm going out to meet a client today. Remember to stay here in the morning. Xiao Zhang at the front desk took half a day off today and will only be here at noon. If you leave, there will be no one in the office." Gu Nianji quickly said, "No problem, leave it to me." She had nothing to do the whole morning. She finished her daily work, and when it was lunchtime, Xiao Zhang at the front desk came. Both of them were young girls and the boss wasn't around. They quickly got together and started gossiping. Xiao Zhang said mysteriously, "Lawyer Gu, do you know what kind of big shot is coming today?" Gu Nianji, "I don't know." In their small law firm, a street director was already a big shot. Xiao Zhang tugged at her sleeve. "It's really a big shot. I heard that the chairman of the Qin Corporation is coming. When I went upstairs, the entrance of the building was already under martial law." Gu Nianji, "Qin Corporation? Which Qin Corporation?" Gu Nianji asked carefully, thinking that it couldn't be such a coincidence, right? In the end, it really was such a coincidence. "It's the Qin Corporation that runs a private hospital. Don't tell me you don't even know about the Qin private hospital?" Xiao Zhang rolled her eyes at Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji smiled and said casually, "Is it very famous? I'm from the countryside, so I don't know." Before she could finish speaking, a man pushed open the small glass door of their law firm. He was wearing a well-ironed suit, and his hair was combed until it was shiny. His entire body seemed to say, "I am the CEO's secretary. May I ask if Miss Gunyenji is here? Our chairman Qin wants to see her." The man spoke politely and gave Xiao Zhang at the front desk a shiny business card that still smelled of perfume. This was today's chapter of 4,700 words, chapter 1497, Caught in the Crossfire. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. I still have to work overtime, so I only have enough time to write this chapter today. It's almost midnight. Moi. Chapter 1509. Gunyenji was sitting next to Xiao Zhang, but the man ignored her and handed the business card to Xiao Zhang at the front desk. He didn't even look at Gunyenji. Gunyenji's heart sank. The Qin family had already come knocking on her door, so how could she not show this person her photo? How could he not know what she looked like? He clearly recognized her, but he pretended not to. This kind of behavior had already expressed their attitude. Gunyenji didn't say anything. She got up and left. She walked to the only room in their small law firm and slammed the door. There were only 2 rooms in this small firm. The lawyer's office was inside and the front desk was outside. Xiao Zhang was almost dumbfounded by the man's business card. The big shot that they had just been gossiping about had suddenly descended from the sky and stood in front of her. Oh my God. Her legs had gone limp. She didn't even notice when Gunyenji had left. She only came back to her senses when she heard the door slam. She said enthusiastically, "Mr. Fong, right? Are you really the secretary of the president of the Qin Corporation?" This man was the first secretary of the chairman and president of the Qin Corporation. He smiled reservedly and nodded. "This is our company's phone number. If you don't believe me, you can call to check. Our chairman's motorcade is still parked at the entrance of the building. The police have sent people downstairs to secure the building." Xiao Zhang gasped and quickly said, "Please wait a moment, I'll go look for Lawyer Gu." She got up and knocked on the office door, but there was no sound from inside. Xiao Zhang was stunned for a moment. She returned to the front desk and called Gunyenji. In order to show her respect for the chairman of the Qin Corporation, Xiao Zhang put the phone on speaker. "Lawyer Gu, the chairman of the Qin Corporation wants to see you." Xiao Zhang was so excited that her voice was trembling. Gunyenji's calm voice came through the phone. "Really? Do you have an appointment?" Secretary Fong. She was really putting on airs. Xiao Zhang, oh my. Lawyer Gu was so cool. Xiao Zhang had been suppressed by the aura of the secretary of the Qin Corporation's president, but when she heard Gunyenji's calm demeanor, she immediately calmed down. She turned off the speaker and picked up the phone. Xiao Zhang's professional front desk manner also came out. Her voice was even sweeter. "Lawyer Gu, let me check your appointment record." She pretended to dig through the computer. After a while, she said regretfully, "The other party doesn't have an appointment." Of course there was no appointment. Gunyenji had only been working for a week and hadn't seen a single client. How could there be an appointment? The corners of Gunyenji's lips curled up in the inner office. She turned her chair to look out the window. The second floor did not have a good view of the skyline. All he could see was the building right in front of him, and it was completely blocked. However, she was no different from sitting in Speaker Long's office overlooking the beautiful scenery of the entire imperial capital. She continued to say calmly, "Then make an appointment. I've been very busy recently. I won't be free until next week at the earliest." Xiao Zhang worshipped Gunyenji to death. How could she lie without batting an eyelid in front of such a rich and powerful person? Anyway, the other party didn't want to see her, so Xiao Zhang immediately went into spectator mode and cooperated with Gunyenji's performance. She raised her head and smiled at the secretary. "Hello, would you like to make an appointment?" Secretary Fong thought he had heard wrong. He tilted his head and pointed his ear at Xiao Zhang. "What did you say?" "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you clearly." Xiao Zhang smiled and thought to herself that the CEO's secretary was actually deaf. If such a person could be the CEO's secretary of the Qin Corporation, then wouldn't a receptionist like her have a bright future? Thinking this, Xiao Zhang still smiled professionally and said again, "You need to make an appointment to see our lawyer. When do you want to make an appointment? Our lawyer Gu is very busy, and the latest time is next week." Secretary Fong choked. He turned his head to look at the smiling receptionist and roared in his heart to refuse. She needed to make an appointment. To think that he would be able to do whatever he wanted in the entire Wuxia Empire with Chairman Qin. Even if he wanted to see General He now, his personal secretary wouldn't dare mention the word appointment, let alone a lawyer from a small law firm. After so many years he actually heard the word, appointment, again. Haha, Gunyanji really thought of herself as a big shot, didn't she? No wonder Dean Qin didn't like her. Secretary Fang's expression froze for a moment. He wanted nothing more than to turn around and leave. But when he thought about how the chairman had traveled from south to north, and then from north to south, just to see this woman, what could he do? Of course he gave in. Secretary Fang looked constipated and said stiffly, "Our chairman wants to see Gunyanji not for business but for personal matters. May I ask if you need to make an appointment for a personal matter?" Sigh. The young and beautiful lawyer Gu, who had just graduated from a third-rate law firm, had a personal matter with the chairman of the world-class Qin Corporation. Xiao Zhang was blown away by this news. In an instant she imagined several love and hate stories from the CEO's novels. Heavy. Her fingers subconsciously touched her phone. She wanted nothing more than to immediately post on Weibo, "Why did the chairman of the Qin Corporation privately meet the young and beautiful lawyer Gu from the Qin law firm?" The sensational title, coupled with the back view of the CEO's secretary, lawyer Gu's face, would definitely immediately become a hot topic. She would also be able to gain a wave of fans. Little Zhang struggled in his heart, and it took him a long time to regain his rationality. If she dared to use this news to become a hot topic, whether it was lawyer Gu or the Qin Corporation, they would tear her apart alive. Stop it. Gaining fans was important, but life was more valuable. Looking at Secretary Fang's fake smile, Xiao Zhang had no choice but to call Gunyanji again. "Lawyer Gu, the other party said that he was looking for you for personal matters, not business." Gunyanji smiled widely in the inner office and said righteously, "If it's not business then it shouldn't be. We work for people, so how can we do personal matters during office hours? Please ask that gentleman to leave our office and not interfere with everyone's work." Everyone was actually just two people. Xiao Zhang was extremely curious, but she still knew her duty as a receptionist. She also wanted to send this man away so that she could interrogate Gunyanji about her relationship with the Qin Corporation. After hanging up the phone, Xiao Zhang spread out her hands at the secretary. "I'm sorry, our lawyer Gu said that it's working hours now, so she can't handle personal matters. Please go back." Secretary Fang was furious. How many large meetings had he organized? How many meetings had he coordinated between the heads of state and his boss? How did he get screwed over in a small law firm? Secretary Fang turned off the pinhole camera on his lapel and slammed the front desk. With a dark expression he said, "Okay, don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." He turned around and left. He kicked open the glass door of the small law firm and went back to the 30th floor to report. At that moment, old Master Qin, the 70-year-old chairman of the Qin Corporation, was having a meeting with the president and chairman of the Lu Corporation, Lu Yuan. "President Lu, this time, our company has completely replaced the computer security system. We've inspected many companies and your bid is the most suitable for our requirements." Old Master Qin sat on the sofa in Lu Yuan's office. He held a cup of kung fu tea in his hand and lowered his head to sniff the fragrance of the tea. He was wearing a tang shirt and trousers made of fragrant cloud gauze. His hair was all white but his face was rosy. He looked ancient and very stylish. Lu Yuan brought his technical director, operations director and finance director to sit opposite old Master Qin. He smiled and picked up a cup of kung fu tea to sniff it. He said, "Thank you for your kindness, old Master Qin. It was a pleasant surprise that our company was able to win the bid this time." The technical director of the Lu Corporation was Zhao Liangzi. He was the one who had drafted the bid. He also smiled and said, "Old Master Qin is really bold. When we were bidding, your vice president once said that our bid was too expensive. I hope it's not too expensive." Old Master Qin also laughed out loud and said, "They're petty. They only know how to save money for me. But didn't they think that in terms of network security they could also save money? I believe in the technology of the head office. If you don't have a diamond, don't do porcelain work. Too cheap. I'm worried that they don't have the ability." The Qin Medical Group's assets were now spread all over the world, and the security of the entire group's network system was even more urgent. It wasn't something that could be solved by installing a 3x0 system. In the end, old Master Qin still knows what's good for him. Lu Yuan smiled and the corners of his lips curled into a happy arc. The lines at the corners of his long and narrow eyes rose, and he was so charming that people couldn't close their legs. The female secretaries and female executives on old Master Qin's side quickly retracted their gazes and didn't dare to look anymore. If they continued to look, they would probably fall into an extramarital relationship. They quickly agreed on the general direction of the cooperation, and the specific contract would be negotiated by the executives, lawyers and accountants of both sides. The total value of the entire contract could exceed 1 billion yuan, and each clause had to be verified by the lawyers and accountants of both sides. Zhao Liangzi led them out of Lu Yuan's office and went to the conference room next door to discuss the contract. Only Lu Yuan and Old Master Qin were left in the office. They drank kung fu tea and chatted until Secretary Fang's slightly urgent knock on the door interrupted their conversation. "Come in." Lu Yuan glanced at Old Master Qin and asked the people outside to let him in. Secretary Fang walked in with a sullen face and nodded at Lu Yuan. "CEO Lu." Lu Yuan smiled at him. "Hello, Secretary Fang. I was wondering why Old Master Qin didn't bring his most trusted Secretary Fang when he came to our place. This compliment was just right." Old Master Qin and Secretary Fang both laughed. Secretary Fang composed himself and said to Old Master Qin, "Chairman, Gunyanji said that you can only see her if you make an appointment." Old Master Qin, Lu Yuan, Secretary Fang was extremely happy to see the expressions on the faces of these two people. As expected, it was better to be wrong than to be wronged alone. He felt comfortable when he saw that others were unhappy as well. The corners of Old Master Qin's mouth twitched. "What did you say? She really wants to make an appointment. What exactly did you say?" Secretary Fang glanced at Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan stood up and put his hands in his trouser pockets. He said calmly, "I'm going out for a while." Old Master Qin waved for him to sit down. "President Lu isn't an outsider. There's no need to avoid him." He explained to Lu Yuan, "It's like this. This Gunyanji is actually my granddaughter. She was born to my good-for-nothing daughter before she married General He. She only gave birth to this one child in her life, and they're like fire and water. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I wanted to meet this child and be a peacemaker for the mother and daughter." Lu Yuan replied with an "oh," and sat down with a smile. "So that's how it is." Old Master Qin is already so old, but he's still worried about his children. "Not at all." Old Master Qin shook his head with emotion. "When I was young, I was also focused on my career and didn't pay much attention to my daughter. By the time I remembered to care more about her, she had already grown up and become an adult. She had her own values and principles. It was too late, too late." Lu Yuan smiled but didn't say anything. This was someone else's family matter, so it wasn't appropriate for him to interrupt. Old Master Qin played with the iron walnut and said to Secretary Fang, "You also need to make an appointment for private matters? Didn't you make it clear?" "I did." Secretary Fang took out the pinhole camera he had on him. "I recorded it all. Take a look for yourself." Otherwise, if Old Master Qin thought that he was playing tricks, he really wouldn't be able to explain it clearly. Secretary Fang transferred the contents of the pinhole camera to his phone and showed it to Old Master Qin. Lu Yuan sat opposite him. Although he couldn't see the contents of the video, he could clearly hear the voice coming from the phone's microphone. When they heard someone say, "I'm sorry, our lawyer Gu said that it's working hours now and we don't deal with private matters. Please go back." Lu Yuan and Old Master Qin laughed together. Old Master Qin was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. "I like this child. This posture, this style, she's neither servile nor overbearing and she's not led by the nose. I like her so much. I want her to change her surname to Qin and be a child of our Qin family." Lu Yuan, Secretary Fang. Old Master Qin waved his hand. "Just go and make an appointment with her. I can afford to wait." Secretary Fang had no choice but to go down to the second floor dejectedly. He pushed the door open again and entered the Jin family law firm. He said politely to the young lady at the front desk, "Hello, I'd like to make an appointment to see Lawyer Gu." It had only been 10 minutes since they last met, but this person's attitude was much more sincere and he wasn't as arrogant as before. Xiao Zhang looked at Secretary Fang in surprise. After a while he picked up the phone and called Gu Nianji. "Lawyer Gu, the chairman of the Qin Corporation wants to make an appointment with you. When are you free?" At this time, Gu Nianji was in the inner office searching for information about the Qin Corporation. The more she looked, the more amazed she became. Such a large corporation had hospitals and investments all over the world. It could be ranked in the top 100 of the world's largest corporations. It was indeed very impressive. The chairman of such a large corporation wanted to see her only for Qin Yaoguang's sake. This was because the chairman's only daughter was Qin Yaoguang, and Gu Nianji happened to be Qin Yaoguang's only daughter. When she received another call from Xiao Zhang at the front desk, Gu Nianji didn't continue to put on airs. She said, "Since they're so sincere, I can squeeze half an hour to see them tomorrow morning." Secretary Fang agreed and said, "I'll go back and make an appointment." After returning to the 30th floor and discussing with Old Master Qin, they arranged to meet on the 18th floor of this building. Because they had negotiated a contract with Lu Yuan's company, the Qin Corporation had also rented an office space in this building for the convenience of future cooperation. They planned to move the IT-related departments here. Jin Dezhuang came back in the afternoon. He was also surprised to hear about Gu Nianji from the front desk. He walked to Gu Nianji's desk with a thermos cup filled with wolfberries and asked with concern, "Nianji, what's going on between you and the Qin Corporation?" Gu Nianji looked up at him and shrugged. "I don't know either. I'm also very confused about why you suddenly came to see me." "Okay, do you want me to go with you tomorrow?" Jin Dezhuang saw that she was a little girl and was very afraid that something would happen to her. Gu Nianji's heart warmed. She thought to herself that although she wasn't popular with her family, she was still popular with passers-by. She could always meet people who were willing to treat her well and show kindness. She shook her head with a smile and pointed above her head. "No need, it's on the 18th floor here. If anything goes wrong, I'll call you right away." "Okay." Jin Dezhuang was relieved to hear that they would meet here. After a night of rest, Gu Nianji went to work in high spirits the next day. Jin Dezhuang and Xiao Zhang at the front desk cheered her on. "Good luck. It's best if you can curry favor with the Qin Corporation. We'll follow you and live a good life." Gu Nianji laughed. "Don't dream on such a clear day. Wake up and order takeout for me. I didn't have breakfast this morning." She tossed and turned last night and fell asleep very late. Even the alarm clock in the morning didn't wake her up and she was almost late. Of course she didn't eat breakfast. "Go ahead, I'll order it for you." Xiao Zhang at the front desk quickly picked up her phone to order for her. Gu Nianji walked to the elevator. This was the first time she had taken the elevator upstairs. In the past she had always taken the stairs directly. When she arrived at the 18th floor, Secretary Fang was waiting for her at the door. As soon as he saw her coming out of the elevator, he quickly walked over and said, "Miss Gu, this way please." "Please call me Lawyer Gu." Gu Nianji nodded. "Our law firm's rule is that the first half an hour of meeting with a client is free." Secretary Fang, was he going to call her professional or stupid? He glanced at her and walked in front of her to push open the door of the conference room. This was a small conference room on the 18th floor. There were 7 or 8 people sitting on both sides of the long conference table, and the entire conference room was packed. At the head of the table sat an old man with white hair and a youthful face. He was probably Chairman Qin. There were also 2 people she knew. One was Miss Qin Yaoguang, whose hand was wrapped in white gauze. The other was Zhao Liangzi. Gu Nianji raised an eyebrow and thought to herself that Qin Yaoguang was here. Could Wen Shuyi be far away? She glanced around but didn't see Wen Shuyi. "Is it Nianji? I've finally seen you." Old Master Qin smiled and waved at her. Gu Nianji walked in and sat down at the place designated by Old Master Qin. Old Master Qin first introduced her to the people in the conference room. "Everyone, this is Gu Nianji. She's my granddaughter and my daughter only has one daughter." As he spoke, he said to Gu Nianji, "These are all people from our company. They're all your uncles and uncles." The corners of Gu Nianji's mouth twitched and she nodded politely at them. Of course she didn't call them uncles and uncles. Those people didn't dare to and all came over to shake hands with her. Old Master Qin introduced the people on the other side. "They're from the Lu Corporation. You work here, so it's never bad to get to know more people. This is President Lu, and this is Director Zhao." Gu Nianji memorized them one by one and exchanged business cards with them. The atmosphere became harmonious. Seeing that the time was right, Old Master Qin smiled and said, "Nianji, I haven't seen you for a few years and you've grown up. I know you've been wronged. I've already said it to your mother, so you should also take a step back and apologize to your mother. We're all family, so don't treat me like an outsider." Gu Nianji felt extremely awkward when she heard this. She said it was family business, but didn't she feel awkward talking about family business in front of a bunch of outsiders? She said it was business, but she didn't talk about the company's business. So he wanted to use outsiders to pressure her to shake hands with Qin Yaoguang? Gu Nianji smiled and said aloofly, "Mr. Qin, I'm here today for business." Old Master Qin laughed loudly. "Child, you have the same temper as your mother. No wonder you're at odds with each other." Qin Yaoguang said reluctantly, "Nianji, don't be like this in the future. If *CK it's her fault now?" Gu Nianji's anger flared. However, she didn't show it on her face. She said, "I don't understand what you mean. May I ask what it is for?" "Nianji," Old Master Qin said earnestly, "your mother doesn't have bad intentions. She's just straightforward. She's been doing scientific research all her life, so her words aren't pleasant to hear. If she offends you," Gu Nianji couldn't help it anymore. She smiled and nodded. "Indeed. Mrs. Qin really isn't an ordinary straightforward person. She's like an earthworm that has turned into a spirit, and her intestines are open to the end." To be able to say to her own daughter that she didn't treat her as her own daughter and that she was just someone else's medicine, this kind of straightforward person could only be explained by an earthworm that has turned into a spirit. This was today's chapter of 5,500 words, chapter 1498, Diamond and Porcelain Work. Reminder: monthly votes and recommendation votes. 5,500 words was actually equivalent to 2 chapters. Mwah. Chapter 1510. As soon as Gu Nianji finished speaking, the meeting room fell silent. Many people were having a hard time holding it in. Old Master Qin's expression darkened. Zhao Yangzi couldn't help it. He stood up and held back his laughter. "Excuse me." After leaving the small meeting room, he rubbed his stomach and laughed so hard that he couldn't stand still. "Ha ha, an earthworm has become a spirit, an earthworm has become a spirit." This girl's words are poisonous. The other people in the meeting room were older than him. They were all old foxes, so they could still hold it in. Only Qin Yaoguang was furious. Her expression changed drastically. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue and purple were all present. It could be said that she was very angry. She stood up with a swoosh and kicked Gu Nianji, who was sitting next to her. She said in a low voice, "Is that how you talk to your biological mother? Why did I give birth to you in the first place?" If it weren't for the fact that her hands were still wrapped in bandages, based on her personality, she would have slapped her. Now that she couldn't hit with her hands, she could only kick with her feet. Gu Nianji hadn't expected Qin Yaoguang to be so straightforward, that she would kick her in front of so many people. However, it was obvious that Qin Yaoguang didn't have any martial arts background, so this kick looked domineering. In fact, with Gu Nianji's skills, she could have dodged it. However, the small meeting room was crowded with people. Next to her was Lu Yuan, the chairman and CEO of the Lu Corporation. If she dodged, Qin Yaoguang's kick would have landed on the CEO. Gu Nianji didn't want others to take the blame for her, so she could only quickly turn her head away. She planned to use her back to withstand Qin Yaoguang's fierce kick. Unexpectedly, her seat was suddenly dragged by a strong force. The entire seat slid backward and then stopped. Her shoulder was held tightly by someone, so she didn't fall off the seat due to the inertia. Qin Yaoguang kicked out, but she didn't expect to kick empty air. Unable to stop his momentum in time, he fell hard onto the ground without a care for his image. "Yaoguang. Dean Qin. Dean Qin, are you okay?" The people from the Qin Corporation immediately surrounded her. With Secretary Fang as the leader, they helped Qin Yaoguang up. Qin Yaoguang's hair was messy, and her forehead was covered in beads of sweat. She glared in Gu Nianji's direction and gritted her teeth, as if she had a deep grudge against her. Gu Nianji shrugged and said innocently, "Everyone saw it. She was the one who started it. She wanted to kick me, but I just dodged to prevent her from doing so." After saying that, she turned to look at the person who had just saved her. Her big bright eyes were filled with gratitude. "Director Lu, thank you for saving me. Otherwise, Madame Qin's kick would have killed me or crippled me." The corners of Lu Yuan's mouth twitched. He thought to himself, Qin Yaoguang's kick would at most leave a footprint on her back. If she wasn't dead, she would be crippled? That woman might not be that capable. However, he also knew that because of his interference, Qin Yaoguang had not been able to kick Gu Nianji down. Instead, she had fallen to the ground with a big split. Not only had she made a fool of herself, but she had also likely sprained her leg bone. Under such circumstances, of course, the more serious the consequences of Qin Yaoguang's attempt to kick Gu Nianji, the better. He withdrew his hand from Gu Nianji's shoulder and nodded with a smile. He said gently, "When I see injustice on the road, I draw my sword to help. Don't take it to heart. I believe that no matter who is sitting in my position, they will save you." His voice wasn't very deep, but it had a magnetism that tugged at one's heartstrings. His tone was also gentle, which formed a strong contrast with his tall and stalwart figure. Not to mention that handsome face, it was so charming that it didn't even know it. Gu Nianji, who was obsessed with his voice and looks, secretly gave President Lu a thumbs up in her heart. Old Master Qin's expression changed again before he scolded Qin Yaoguang. Yaoguang, you're too reckless. How can you lay your hands on your own daughter? No matter how harsh she says, you can only endure it. Who asked you to be a parent? Do you think it's that easy to be a mother? What did I teach you in the past? What did your mother teach you when she was alive? I really can't afford to have this daughter. Qin Yaoguang's eyes were like cold stars as she glanced at everyone in the meeting room. Her gaze swept past Lu Yuan's face and finally returned to Gu Nianji's face. Everyone saw how she humiliated me in public. It seems like we really aren't compatible. Whatever happens to you in the future has nothing to do with me. Don't use my name to swindle people outside. I'm sorry to disappoint you, President Lu. I'll still say the same thing. I've never treated her as my biological daughter. Gu Nianji's heart burned when she heard this, and she interrupted her without hesitation. Mrs. Qin, you've said it many times and I'll tell you again. I've never known you, nor have I ever treated you as my biological mother. You keep saying that you don't treat me as your biological daughter, but you keep going around proclaiming that I'm your biological daughter. What do you mean by that? If you don't say it, no one will know. But not only did you proclaim it everywhere, but you also interfered in my business. I'm warning you, I've tolerated you for a long time. If you dare to touch me again, I'll make you an internet celebrity in the entire Wuxia Empire. A biological mother who humiliates her biological daughter in every possible way. I'll make your name go down in history. Gu Nianji stood up and gently patted the non-existent dust off her sleeves, as if she couldn't wait to dust Qin Yaoguang off like dust. Qin Yaoguang glared at Gu Nianji and said in disbelief, "Are you threatening me? Is that how you talk to your biological mother?" Mrs. Qin, you just said that you've never treated me as your biological daughter, and now you're saying that I'm talking to my biological mother. What do you mean? Gu Nianji rolled her eyes. Or do you mean that you don't have to treat me as your biological daughter, but I have to treat you as my biological mother, and you can hit and scold me as you please, right? Qin Yaoguang sneered. It's good that you know your limits. I really don't treat you as my biological daughter, but I did give birth to you, so how dare you not treat me as your biological mother? Clap, clap, clap. Gu Nianji stood up and raised her hand to clap a few times. A smile appeared on her face. Mrs. Qin, it's a good thing you're a doctor, not a lawyer, and not a real scientist with your ability to pester people endlessly. Your logic is so lousy that it's earth-shattering. Did I say something wrong? Qin Yaoguang looked at the people in the conference room. You guys be the judge. What did I say wrong? I'm a mother and she's a daughter. Can she erase this fact? Yes, you're a mother. You can refuse to acknowledge me as your daughter, but as your daughter, I can't refuse to acknowledge you as my mother. Isn't that what you mean? Gu Nianji put her hands behind her back and stood up straight. She looked at Qin Yaoguang like lightning. Qin Yaoguang's lips parted and she frowned. She said vaguely, if you really treated me as your mother, would you have said such disgusting things just now? If you treated me as your mother, would I not treat you as my biological daughter? In one sentence, she had confused the relationship between the two of them into that Qin Yaoguang, her mother, didn't acknowledge her because Gu Nianji was unfilial. Gu Nianji actually wanted nothing more than to draw a clear line between her and Qin Yaoguang. She could even go to court to break off their mother-daughter relationship. However, she couldn't let others think that she was unfilial, so Qin Yaoguang did not acknowledge her. As a lawyer, she couldn't let her private morals have such a flaw. Gu Nianji tilted her head in amusement. Mrs. Qin, are you saying that I'm unfilial, so you don't treat me as your biological daughter? You know very well whether you're filial or not. Qin Yaoguang calmed down and sat back in her chair. Her legs were aching and it was all because of this wretched girl. Gu Nianji saw that Qin Yaoguang had fallen for her trap and immediately said, That's strange. How am I unfilial? Can you explain it to everyone? I won't take the blame for something I don't understand. Do you want me to explain it? Qin Yaoguang narrowed her eyes and said with a half-smile, Where have you been all these years? Why did you leave my side and run away with someone? Do you want me to say it? She was certain that Gu Nianji wouldn't tell everyone about the parallel space, so she brazenly hinted to everyone that it was Gu Nianji who was disobedient, that she, as a mother, wouldn't acknowledge her. Even if Gu Nianji was stupid and dared to tell everyone about the parallel space, Qin Yaoguang would have even more reason to make Gu Nianji undergo a memory removal surgery. In short, she wouldn't be at ease keeping this daughter by her side unless she had a memory removal surgery. Gu Nianji instantly understood Qin Yaoguang's intentions. She was certain that Gu Nianji wouldn't dare to tell her where she had been these past few years to prove her innocence, so she dared to distort the truth. But since Gu Nianji had dug this trap, how could she not have considered this problem? This time she wanted to shut Qin Yaoguang's mouth once and for all so that she wouldn't dare to bring up the matter of her biological daughter again. Gu Nianji stopped smiling, and her expression became even more pitiful. Mrs. Qin, what do you mean? Are you saying that I haven't been by your side for the past few years and haven't fulfilled my obligation to support you? That's why you don't like me? Qin Yaoguang was about to nod when she suddenly thought of Gu Nianji's age. Her heart skipped a beat and she realized that she had been tricked by Gu Nianji. She was about to deny it when Gu Nianji spoke before she could. Mrs. Qin, if you don't say anything, does that mean you agree? TSK, how much do you hate me? I only turned 18 last year, which means I've only just become an adult. Do you expect a minor child to fulfill her obligation to support you? Is it interesting for you to use this excuse to cover up your felony of abandoning your biological daughter? Gu Nianji spread her hands in front of everyone and said aggrievedly, everyone listen up. I was abandoned by Mrs. Qin when I was 12 and was adopted by a kind-hearted person. I haven't been by Mrs. Qin's side for so many years, so how can I be filial to Mrs. Qin? I won't talk about Miss Qin's ridiculous idea of having a minor to support her. But don't worry, Mrs. Qin, I won't go to court to sue you for abandonment. Just like you said, you don't have to treat me as your biological daughter, but I can't not treat you as my biological mother. I'm only thinking about going to court to sue you for abandonment and humiliating you and the Qin Corporation. I won't do it unless I'm forced into a corner. You and old Master Qin can rest assured. Gu Nianji's smile was so natural that everyone in the meeting room was stunned. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1499, Once and for All. A reminder for everyone's monthly and recommendation tickets. Today was Monday, so there were special recommendation tickets. There was an increase of 2,000 monthly tickets at 8 p.m. Moi. Chapter 1511. Everyone in the meeting room heard very clearly that Gu Nianji was actually threatening Qin Yaoguang. If she continued to make a scene, Gu Nianji would go to court to sue her for abandonment. Gu Nianji was already an adult. Suing her for this crime was actually useless to her, but there was a potential benefit. If she won the lawsuit, Qin Yaoguang wouldn't be able to use her biological mother as an excuse to make any demands on Gu Nianji, including support. This was equivalent to breaking away from her legal mother-daughter relationship with Qin Yaoguang. Gu Nianji's birth had always been a mess. She was not a normal, legitimate child. The senior executives of the Qin Corporation knew this very well. At that time, if someone with ulterior motives took advantage of it, it would deal a heavy blow to the reputation of the Qin Corporation. It was very likely that it would directly set off a storm in the stock market. If there was a selling frenzy, each of them would have to bear a huge loss. These people were all senior executives of the Qin Group and held shares of the Qin Group in their hands. They had to think about their own interests. Moreover, Qin Yaoguang had indeed gone too far today. After being mocked by the young lady, she wanted to kick her. Not only was her mother unkind, she even accused her daughter of being unfilial. That was too much. Seeing that the situation was hopeless, Qin Yaoguang could only take a deep breath and close her eyes. She didn't want to see Gu Nianji being sharp-tongued. It was her nightmare. She didn't expect to see someone sharp-tongued again after so many years. Old Master Qin saw that the mother and daughter had fallen out, so he had no choice but to mediate. Nianji, your mother was wrong. I'll teach her a lesson. If you need anything in the future, just come to me. Don't worry about your mother. As he spoke, he walked over and very kindly stuffed his business card into her hand. This is a name card that I only give to my close friends and family. Keep it well. It's not easy for a young lady outside. If you don't rely on your family, should you rely on outsiders? Old Master Qin patted her on the shoulder. Gu Nianji took a step to the side and said dryly, I don't rely on others. I only rely on myself. Mr. Qin, is there anything else? If not, I'll be leaving first. She looked at her watch. 25 minutes had passed. Old Master Qin sighed. I was going to be the peacemaker today, but I didn't expect things to turn out like this. All right, you can go back first. I'll give you a call in a few days and find you a good job. How can my granddaughter work in a small law firm like that? Qin Yaoguang pursed her lips and said to Old Master Qin in a drawl, Dad, you really take her seriously. You're just a small law firm employee, but you sure are arrogant. Gu Nianji was mocked by Qin Yaoguang, but she wasn't angry at all. She seemed to have a good temper and said with a smile, "Miss Qin, this isn't putting on airs. This is a professional attitude and professional ethics. Of course, different professions are worlds apart. You're a doctor, so you don't understand the rules of the lawyer profession." She glanced at the people in the conference room and saw that some people really didn't think much of her, especially the so-called senior executives of the Qin Corporation. She raised her brows and lightly smiled. "Our law firm may be small, but it's registered with the Industry and Commerce Department and licensed by the Bar Association. We're not a private hospital that disregards the law. If we don't take ourselves seriously, how can we expect others to take us seriously?" Qin Yaoguang's pupils constricted as she said coldly, "Who are you saying is ignoring the law?" "I'm talking about whichever private hospital is ignoring the law." Gu Nianji raised her chin slightly with a haughty attitude. "You think you can spout nonsense just because you're a lawyer? Be careful or I'll sue you for slander," Qin Yaoguang said coldly. Her eyes were abnormally cold and she looked at her like she was looking at a lab rat. Gu Nianji chuckled and shook her head. "Miss Qin, you really know how to splash dirty water on your own head. I said private hospitals that disregard the law, but I didn't mention your Qin Corporation's private hospital? There are so many private hospitals in the Wuxia Empire. Why do you think I'm talking about your hospital? Don't tell me, you have a guilty conscience?" "Gu Nianji. Miss Gu, be careful with your words. Don't talk nonsense." The senior executives of the Qin Corporation and Qin Yaoguang sternly criticized Gu Nianji, as if she had said something treasonous. Gu Nianji shrugged. "Do you have to be so guilty? When I said that it was a private hospital that disregarded the law, all of you jumped up like mad bulls that saw red. Let me tell you, I'm a lawyer. The more you act like this, the more curious I am." She dragged out her voice with a sly expression. Her eyes were fearless and she could even look at Old Master Qin for a long time. Old Master Qin looked at her for a while and suddenly burst into laughter. "The younger generation will surpass the older. The younger generation will surpass the older. The Qin Corporation has a successor. We have a successor. Gu Nianji? It's over." Did she make this old man lose his mind from anger? Gu Nianji frowned slightly and looked at Old Master Qin suspiciously. The president of the Lu Corporation, Lu Yuan, said leisurely, "Lawyer Gu is very ambitious. Back then, I was also poor and started from scratch. I relied entirely on myself to achieve what I have today. After so many years in society, I only have one thought: don't bully a young man for being poor." He took the initiative to reach out his hand to Gu Nianji. His attitude was very humble. "Lawyer Gu, our company has been talking about a new law firm recently. We're recruiting more than one partner. If you're interested, you might as well join the bidding." Gu Nianji was overjoyed. She shook Lu Yuan's hand a few times. "Xiao Lu, is what you said true? I'm an honest person. I'll take anything you say seriously." "How could I not keep my word in front of so many people from the Qin Corporation?" Lu Yuan smiled. "The most important thing in business is credibility, especially since we're in the business of cybersecurity. We know the importance of credibility more than anyone else." Okay. I'll go back and check your company's bidding requirements and make a bid right away." Gu Nianji was so excited that she couldn't wait to go back and start working. This was her first big deal in this side of the world. If it succeeded, their small law firm would be able to upgrade their shotguns in minutes. She could also immediately talk to Jean Dezhuang about the partnership. At that time, she would no longer be a small employee who worked with others. She would also be a boss. Gu Nianji's heart finally calmed down. She hated that kind of floating state. She was like duckweed without a foundation. "Okay, I'll wait for your good news." Lu Yuan took good care of her and personally walked her out of the conference room. "You work in this building, right?" Gu Nianji nodded. "I'm on the second floor at the Jean law firm." She added, "Jean Dezhuang is a good person. No one else dares to hire me. He's the only one who gave me a job." Lu Yuan curled his lips. "Lawyer Jean is indeed a good person. Lawyer Gu, go back and discuss it with Lawyer Jean. The bidding ends next week." "Huh? In such a hurry? I'll go prepare right away. Please give me a chance." Gu Nianji bowed to Lu Yuan to thank him. After Lu Yuan sent her off, he returned to the conference room and said to Old Master Qin, "Your daughter is as stubborn as your granddaughter." "Yes, I can't help it." Old Master Qin secretly breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Lu Yuan didn't mind. Gu Nianji's promotion today was unexpected. Old Master Qin really cherished talent. After exchanging a few pleasantries with Lu Yuan, he left the Lu Corporation building with his own people. After getting into his car, he said to Qin Yaoguang lightly, "Don't make things difficult for that child anymore. I want to observe her carefully." "Dad, you don't really want her to be your successor, do you?" Qin Yaoguang's eyes widened. "What's so outstanding about her? Do you all treat her like a treasure?" "Don't worry about that. I know what I'm doing." Old Master Qin glared at her. "Mind your own business. You don't have to worry about anything else." Gu Nianji returned to her law firm and told Jean Dezhuang that the Lu Corporation was talking about a new law firm. She wanted to try out the bid. Jean Dezhuang was shocked and said, "Do you know how big the Lu Corporation is? Why would they take a fancy to small potatoes like us?" "Lawyer Jean, I know, but they won't only work with one law firm, will they? We just need to take a small part of their business and it'll be enough for us to grow stronger. Don't you want to make a small law firm into a big law firm? With all due respect, the difference between us and a big law firm is only the number of people we hire. Our professional standards aren't inferior to theirs at all." Gu Nianji dared to say such big words because she had just gone through a large-scale selection in the other world and formed her own team. She knew who a large team needed and how to select them. Moreover, Jean Dezhuang in the other world was a big law firm's lawyer. In terms of professional standards, the two of them were on par. The only difference was their fate. She patted Jean Dezhuang, who was almost petrified. "Lawyer Jean, we can do it. All the best." The receptionist Xiao Zhang was also extremely excited. She jumped over and said, "I knew I wouldn't be a receptionist in this small law firm for the rest of my life. This is a good opportunity for a small law firm to become a big law firm." Jean Dezhuang looked at the two energetic young women and was also encouraged. He nodded and said, "Looks like I'm really old. I'm not as determined as you guys. Okay, then let's work together and try to take down a part of the Lu Corporation's legal business." This was today's second monthly vote of 2000 plus updates. Chapter 1500, Don't Bully the Young Poor. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. Today was Monday, especially recommendation votes. Mwah. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.